across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yeah, good afternoon. A lot of tiffing going on this afternoon. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Thank you to fabulous Mark Dolan, back on Monday, 7 o'clock, right here on Talk. Lots, as Mark was alluding to get through this afternoon. That record 111,000 asylum claims under Labour has sparked nationwide protest, 27 planned following the Epping Hotel ruling, rising small boat arrivals, and 32,000 migrants, just over in fact, in hotels, straining communities as visa renewals and extended stays also increase. Let me ask you a very straightforward question. It's an easy question, slightly more tricky answer. Where do we put 32,000 people? Lines are open now. Also, the Home Office has awarded £1 million worth of contracts for emergency tents to store up to 700 bodies deployable within 5 days. Critics question the need for such measures amid sustainable terrorism threats and disease like MERS and Ebola. This is government emergency contingency plans. It's a lot of money in that field, it seems. And Labour collected a record £100 billion in tax in July. Just in July. When to be skint? This is driven by Rachel Reeves' national insurance hike, with debt at £2.89 trillion and borrowing at £60 billion for April to July. Economists warn of a £50 billion, there's a lot of billions in this story, a £50 billion fiscal gap leading likely to tax rises come the budget in October. Where does this misery end? Get slashing on the stuff that doesn't matter, Rach, and give us all a bit of a break. 0344 499 1000. It is pretty straightforward, isn't it, the question? What do you do with 32,000 people? Now, you probably have some instinctive answers to this as to what you do with 32,000 people. Many would simply say, well, you send those people back to where they came. Now, of course, we know that notionally that is precisely what should happen. But in reality, I think even huge critics of the government like us here, and certainly me, would acknowledge you probably couldn't physically do that. You couldn't physically do that. Now, you may remember Nigel Farage was challenged on this point, and it wasn't just about the people in hotels. It was about, you know, a wider group of those that have come over here, more like the 111,000 asylum claims in the last year. He was challenged, you know, are you going to get all of those people back to their country of origin? And Mr Farage said, and I'm slightly paraphrasing, he said, well, it would just be impossible to do that. It's not physically possible. Some would say, I think Rupert Lowe is of this school of thought, that, yeah, it is. If you want to do it, you could do it. You could make it happen. You can find a way to make it happen. And I've said this a gazillion times. Ever since COVID, where the government of the day locked down a country, just think of how seismic this is. I think we've all slightly erased some of it, and in some cases all of it, from our memory. It was so utterly statist and barbaric, and you know, went along with it for a couple of weeks for good reason, all doing our bit. We closed down an economy. We closed down businesses. We closed down schools. We closed down people's ability to socialise. Livelihoods were ruined. Health emergency waiting lists were put on hold. People died, not because of the COVID thing, because not being able to get the operation or the scan they needed to inform them they needed the operation. It was quite unreal and almost as if it was a bad, distant dream. And my point to raising COVID again was what I said at the time. Never again can a government say, it's not possible, it's too difficult. If you can lock down an entire economy, not once, by the way, we had 2 or 3 goes at this lockdown thing, right? So over a couple of years, we were pretty much locked down most of the time. If a government can do that, then quite clearly they can do anything. I absolutely 100% believe that. If you can do something as seismic and as destructive as it turned out, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt, even if it was meant for the common good, as massive as shutting down a country. Never happened in the history of mankind. Even during the flipping war, we weren't locked down. If that can happen, then a country can do anything. So when people say, well, there's 111,000 people, asylum claims, since Labour came to power, well, we can't get rid of all of those people. We can't send them all back to their country of origin. If you wanted to, you could. You absolutely could. And of course, even if you did that, it wouldn't even touch the sides of this pervasive problem that's been going on for years. You'd still, I mean, this is only, you know, a small part of the overarching story. Boats don't even, for the people coming over on the channel, don't even form half of that 111,000. It's not even on its own the biggest issue, believe it or not. 0344 499 1000. We do know that this weekend, asylum hotels across the country will be hit by a wave of anti-immigration protests. Lots happening in this. Dozens of demonstrations were planned on Thursday, yesterday, as it emerged that a record 111,000 people had claimed asylum. At least 27 protests have been organised after a High Court judge ordered that removal of migrants from the hotel in Epping, the Bell Hotel, on Tuesday. Many communities hoping to replicate the result of that landmark ruling in their own areas by taking to the streets. Anti-racism groups are also scrambling to, of course they would be, to coordinate counter-protests, claiming towns and cities could experience the most disruption since the riots last summer. These will mostly be peaceful protests. You will have the mad Antifa lot trying to kick off. I don't know why anti-racism protesters should turn up at a racist protest, right? I get that. If there's a racist protest, then that's when you want to call the anti-racism protesters in. That makes sense. These are not racist protests. These are protests from people, ordinary people, who have very strong views about what is happening in this country. Whether you're in Leicester, Maidstone, Falkirk, Liverpool, Stockport, Bristol, Bournemouth, Tamworth, Gloucester, Manchester, Orpington, Perth, Altrincham, Aberdeen, the list goes on. You think everyone there's going to be a mad racist with Eugene Terre Blanche tattooed on their buttocks? Get out of here. No, these are concerned people that are very, very unhappy with what is happening in their communities and believe that inaction by the government is to blame. It does leave that rather messy question. But what do you do with all the people in those hotels? 32,000 of them and counting. What do you do? Where do you put 32,000 people? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Callum Price is the Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Callum, good afternoon to you. Can you hear us, Callum?
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Yeah, we can loud and clear. We've got you now. Yeah, we can. There was a momentary blip there for a second. So let's start on that story. We know that anti-migrant protests are rising as asylum claims hit 111,000 this week. This is under Labour, with 32,000 migrants still, of course, in those taxpayer-funded hotels. This comes on the back of the Epping story. Let's have a listen. On the back of all of this, we know that Kemi Badenoch has been talking and suggesting local councils follow suit. Let's have a listen to what the leader of the opposition had to say.
We need to make sure that communities like Epping are safe. What a lot of the parents, the mothers, and even some of the children have said to me is that they don't feel safe. It is unfair to impose this burden on communities, and then we see the sort of crimes that we were hearing about. Lots of people here have been talking about being harassed by a lot of people in the hotels. Not everyone here is a genuine asylum seeker. People are arriving in our country illegally, and that is why we have a plan to make sure that people who arrive here illegally are deported immediately. We need to close down that pathway to citizenship that means that lots of people get here not making any contributions, claiming welfare, claiming benefits, and we also need a deterrent. At the moment, we have hotels for people not being able to use them. It's not the right place to put a lot of these people. Neither are private homes. My worry is that things are actually going to get worse as Labour tries to move people out of hotels and into private accommodation. I think that is going to be a much worse situation.
Very easy, Callum, of course, if you're the leader of the opposition. Slightly more tricky when you're actually in government. And, of course, Kemi Badenoch was in government when much of these problems began. Nonetheless, we are left with that irredeemable reality that 32,000 people are in hotels, 111,000 people have claimed asylum. It's a bit of a mess, and there's going to be probably nearly 30 protests this week to highlight and articulate people's disquiet over this, understandably so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the difference between government and opposition is being felt quite acutely, I think, by the government now. They had lots to say in opposition about what they should do, but actually their plans, we are now seeing the inevitable fruit of their plans, or frankly, lack of plans. They would get rid of the Rwanda deterrent, they'd get rid of the Bibi Stockholm, and then they do not much else really. And so you've effectively got rid of the major deterrent, so the numbers have increased. Shock. You've got rid of the likes of the Bibi, so there's more and more people, and I think there's 8% more, an 8% rise in the amount of migrants being housed in hotels since Labour came to power, roughly. So they shouldn't really be surprised that we're ending up in this situation. I mean, the crimes that have been committed that kicked off the protests in Epping wasn't necessarily inevitable, but the more and more people you have, the higher risk in hotels, the higher risk of something like that happening. And now they're going to have to work out where to put all of these people, and that's not going to be an easy thing, and they're going to have to go somewhere.
Yeah, well, indeed, and we learned just before we came on air, the Home Office will appeal that Epping migrant hotel ruling after the council won the legal battle. So that, of course, the reality of that is that it wasn't, sadly, it wasn't a victory because a ruling suggested that it's unfair for people to live in communities with 200 unidentified people in it or anything like that. It was about a planning issue. So, I mean, good luck with trying to get this happening elsewhere, but we know that that message has been sent to local authorities. You know, if you can appeal it or if you can force change, then some people are encouraging councils to do that, including Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting and slightly ironic display of the slightly warped, ridiculous planning system we have, but it's once again causing problems for the government. I think lots of people that would complain about the planning system maybe are happy in this instance. But it's not an unsolvable problem from the government by any means. What they need to do is stop or undo the things that they've already stopped. Finding the deterrent, maybe looking at things like the Bibi again. It's not an easy problem to solve by any means, but you were speaking earlier about how the government managed to lock down a country, so should be able to do something. And that is right. The government should be able to do something. But the first thing the government needs to do is just do the basics, and that is restart the Rwanda scheme or something similar, get a proper deterrent, and get serious about where you're going to keep all of these people. They're going to. The problem doesn't stop with the end of the hotels, because the problem isn't necessarily the hotels themselves. It's the amount of people and the fact that they are having to be kept in communities. So be it hotels, be it disused housing blocks or tents, they're still going to be somewhere, and the more and more of them there are, the higher risk there is of something more horrible things going wrong, and the more injustice people feel, and the more protests you get, and it's an increasing cycle until you do something serious. But the Labour government hasn't so far been serious enough about it.
Let's move on to the Lucy Connolly story. And of course, this was yesterday's breaking news that she was released from jail. Few things have happened since then. It is worth just a reminder, though, Callum, of what the Prime Minister had to say about Lucy. This is a rather extraordinary clip, this really is. What Keir Starmer had to say about the sentencing of Connolly when it first happened. Have a listen.
I'm not across the details of the particular case, but let me give you the principles that I would apply. Firstly, I'm strongly in favour of free speech. We've had free speech in this country for a very, very long time, and we protect it fiercely. I'm equally, though, against incitement to violence against other people. That has long been an offence in our country, and rightly so. And so I say, don't know the details of this case, but free speech, yes. Incitement to violence, no.
What jumps out at that, Callum, is he clearly does know the details of this case, because he pretty much just outlined them himself there in that answer.
Yeah, quite. And Keir Starmer always does this when he's asked about free speech. His first port of defence is, we've had free speech in the UK for a very long time. Yes. Well, yes, Keir, but that isn't to say that we necessarily still have it. It isn't something that just exists without people defending it. And the Prime Minister, frankly, hasn't done enough to defend the principle in practice. I think there was a statistic I saw this morning that said in 2015 there was one person convicted of a social media post for stirring up racial hatred. In 2024 there were 44 people convicted of that. Yeah. And yes, there were the Southport riots and the context around that, but the positioning of the Prime Minister matters in these situations. The courts and the police take their lead from the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary's stance. And his stance was come down hard on this, so that's exactly what they did. He didn't say, I want you to focus on policing the streets, not the tweets, to use that slightly pithy line. He said, no, we want to come down hard on this, and that's exactly what happened. And you had this case with Lucy Connolly, which was the sentencing just... I think it sort of beggars belief, to be honest, how severe it was, considering, okay, what she said was a fairly horrible thing to say, but she apologised and took it down very quickly. Keir Starmer, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, actually said that should mean a softer sentence for people being convicted of this specific crime, but it didn't. And she's only just getting out now, and the reports of the effect that it's having on her family are extremely sad.
Well, that's... I was just going to say, Callum, sorry to interject, but the reason why I raised this again today is because since she's been released, her husband, Ray Connolly, has said that the imprisonment was shocking and unfair, accusing Keir Starmer of an enabling two-tier justice. I've always been a bit uncomfortable with the two-tier justice thing. I would just call it an injustice that you go to jail for something like this, and certainly not for 31 months.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's sort of two issues here. It's whether our whole free speech laws in and of themselves, from a fundamental perspective, should people be convicted and sent to prison for things that they say, if it's not sort of actually... I mean, this what she said was a fairly horrible thing to say, but it wasn't quite manning the battlements of going to do something horrible and rallying up a riot in that sense. But then in sort of downstream of that is how strict the punishments should be, and there are plenty of examples that people are pointing to of people that have done much more violent, much more horrible, actual harm-causing things, who have had softer sentences. And I don't know how the sort of justification is, how that lines up there. There's certainly question marks over it.
Indeed. Callum, stay with us. Callum Price, Director of Communications at the IEA, looking at the big stories of the day. Lines are open. On that question in particular, where do we put 32,000 people? So if they closed all the hotels, that leaves you with 32,000 people. Do something with 32,000 people. What do you do with 32,000 people? Details to come. More response from you. Just gone 1:20. This is Talk.
that the state describe Ruda Bacana as a boy with needs. That is astonishing and gives you such a clear insight into the woke, liberal, hand-wringing, pathetic and frankly dangerous thinking that pervades not only senior people in the prison system, but the sentencing council, the parole board, and many other aspects of public life today.
The Labour government
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. We've got Callum Price with us, Director of Communications at the IEA, looking at the big stories of the day. This one jumped out as well, Callum. Labour collecting a record £100 billion in tax last month, sparking fears that Rachel Reeves may seek more as public finances remain weak. Her national insurance hike raised that extra £2.6 billion in July. But she was meant, of course, to keep taxes down. That's the idea. Let's have a reminder.
I'm really clear. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. And that is why, at this budget, we did wipe the slate clean.
What the budget in October did was draw a line under the economic and financial mismanagement of the Conservative government. I've now put our public finances in order, so never again will I have to do a budget like I did in October.
But you
our
were
public
slightly
finances
more...
are now on a firm footing. We have now set the public spending envelope for this Parliament. We don't need to come back and ask for more. We've now set that. We're going to do a zero-based review to make sure we get value for money for every pound that taxpayers' money spent. In that budget, I've tried to fix the foundations and wipe the slate clean.
But it's so 1.3% year after next, for example. And that implies, doesn't it, that you're going to have to come back and ask for yet more tax rises?
Absolutely not. We have now set the envelope of spending for this Parliament and we're going to live within our means.
She's set the envelope of spending. I don't even know what that means, Callum, but nonetheless, I think she's suggesting that there's going to be no more tax rises. Of course, since she said that, there were tax rises, and there's likely to be others on the way in October at the next budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the important thing to hear is to look at, so they very well done to Rachel Reeves for raising £100 billion extra in tax last month. But at what cost is the question?
Yeah.
And that tax raise, as you said, came from raising employers' national insurance contributions. And what else is happening because of that? Well, employers are stopping hiring people. Vacancies are falling and employers' intentions to hire more people are at record lows. So the idea that they aren't taxing working people is firmly been shot. And yes, they have another £50 billion black hole because they seem to be completely incapable of cutting any spending, which is absolutely key, which is the first thing they need to be doing. But they tried to cut winter fuel payments, you turned on that. They tried to cut the welfare bill, you turned on that. So they're going to have to come back with tax rises in the autumn. That much is clear. The question that isn't so clear is exactly where they're going to land. But they need to think, again, back to my first point, at what cost do tax rises come? They need to work out where to tax that isn't going to harm the economy, because otherwise they'll just have to keep coming back more and more and more. And unfortunately, those tax rises, to cover the scale of the black hole that they need to fill, will have to probably fall on working people.
Yeah. I mean, there's no... Politicians can dress this up in any way they like, can't they? But ultimately, there is no way around. You can't circumnavigate the reality that only people that go to work are going to pay the taxes.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. And most people work, so most taxes do fall on employees. There's this myth that you can basically keep going, keep spending as much money as we are, keep increasing that spending on welfare, on pensions or whatever, just by taxing quote unquote other people, basically. Oh, well, we'll just tax corporations. Well, actually, there's no such thing as a corporation in terms of what it's either shareholders, it's customers, or it's employees. They're the people that are going to bear the burden of that. Or we tax rich people. Okay, well, we already tax them a hell of a lot. So how much more can you tax them before they just up sticks and leave? there's been a fundamental dishonesty at the heart of what the Chancellor has been saying from their election campaign through to the last budget through to now, that they can just do everything they want to do, keep spending more and more and more and more money, without impacting other people and without taxing everybody. But I think that fallacy is going to get a rude awakening come the budget in autumn.
Indeed. And let's move to this story. A quarter of Labour members are set to back Jeremy Corbyn's new party. Now, this is interesting for a number of reasons. Of course, we could just write this off and go, well, it's just a few old daft lefties who can't get out the idea that Corbyn is the Messiah, so they're going to back him. But of course, that will hurt Keir Starmer. Labour will say, well, that's the easiest way to guarantee that a centre-right party will be in power. But of course, the centre-right is also a bit split between the Tories and Reform. I tell you what, 2029 is going to be a whopping year for excess. It's not going to be dull, Callum, is it, when it comes to the next election?
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. It's certainly not going to be done at all. With Corbyn on the left and Farage on the right, then the two-party monopoly seems to be coming to an end. I mean, look, a week is a long time in politics, or 4 years is an age, so we'll see how that turns out. But it's certainly an interesting new problem for the Labour government to have to deal with. What I find amusing about Corbyn is his sort of overall narrative that this is a movement that can't be stopped. Yes. Well, actually, I think this is a movement that hasn't come close to power ever, thankfully. So hopefully it will be stopped again, but it certainly will cause a problem for the incumbent Labour government and will pull them leftwards, I'm sure.
Indeed. We'll watch with interest. Callum, thank you as ever. Callum Price, Director of Communications at the IEA. Apologies, there was a slight delay on our line between us and Callum. There is, it's the digital world, kids. We ain't got any explanation, all right? It was just there. This comes from Francis in York. Reference the Epping Hotel appeal. Francis says, completely reasonable, I struggle to find a flaw in this. What exactly are the Home Office going to appeal? They have illegally changed the use of a building without seeking planning and licensing consent. It's set in statute. They can't just change that at the click of their fingers. They have to follow the process, and they can't just rule over the local council. Same with HMOs. If there are 3 or more people living in a dwelling that are not related, it becomes an HMO. Therefore, planning and licensing consent after consultation. These statutory instruments are not advisory. They are set in law. People need to understand this, and people can object to list. People can object. A list of all HMOs is available for every council and is a public document. You are allowed to read it. It's interesting. The only thing I would say to that, Francis, is that I know that there are some landlords who were spotting this ages ago, thinking, right, we'll get this up and running. So if they weren't already renting out HMOs, many of them are now, because they could see what 5 years guaranteed rent and no costs looks like. More on that as it comes in. 0344 499 1000. What do we do with 32,000 people? Let's say all the hotels closed. Let's say they closed on Monday. Where do you put 32,000 people? 0344 499 1000. We've got some great voices coming on this very subject in just a couple of moments. Charlie Downs will be with us from Restore Britain, Harjap Singh Bangal, the immigration lawyer, and Steve Barrett, also a lawyer. But they have very different views on all of this. All coming next on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Around about 27 protests this weekend. Councils pursuing legal challenges to the use of those hotels on the back of what happened in Epping. Some big headlines this week. We know that nationwide asylum claims hit a record 111,000 under Labour. They've only been in power for half an hour. 32,000 people are in taxpayer-funded hotels. Now, if every council won the appeal and all of those people had to leave the hotels, as is happening in Epping, where do you put 32,000 people? A range of guests are coming your way right now. We want your calls, 0344 499 1000. We'll get some legal voices in just a second. First, Charlie Downs, Campaign Director at Restore Britain, is with us. Charlie, afternoon to you. We've spoken so many times on this overarching issue, but there is an irredeemable question here, the irredeemable reality. If you close hotels, all hotels, you've got 32,000 people. Where do they go?
Well, I think there's a few components to this answer, Ian, because the first part of it is what should happen. And from our perspective, what we have been campaigning on is detaining these people because we don't know who they are. Many of them are criminally minded because they've come to the country illegally. We know this. 75% of them are men. 75% of those who've come illegally, over 150,000 since 2018, have been adult males. And so we don't know what these people are here to do, but we know that they do pose a risk to the local community. So they should be detained and they should be placed in tented encampments on MOD land until such a time as we can find either a third country or their home country to send them to. Now, that's what we think should happen. What will happen, more likely, is that these people will be moved into houses of multiple occupancy, which is actually way worse than having them in hotels, because at the very least in a hotel, they're all in one place and there is security on site. Whereas, you know, we're talking about literally moving these unvetted, primarily foreign males into the house next door to you, into the house next door to me. And I don't think anybody wants that. And I think that's going to really exacerbate the tensions that this issue is already causing. But the reason for this is because of this malign web of legislation that is paralysing our system and preventing us from being able to do anything about this issue, that begins with the Human Rights Act in 1998. And the housing issue is due to the Immigration and Asylum Act 1999, which forces the government, compels the government to put up so-called asylum seekers in accommodation. Now, our solution doesn't actually infringe upon either of these laws. Our solution of putting them in tented encampments on MOD land, as long as it meets basic humanitarian standards. But the question is whether the people occupying the system right now, many of whom, like Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer, who are true believers in this doctrine of human rights, whether they would allow that to happen. And I suspect that they wouldn't, which means that not only do we need to repeal these laws, we also need to replace the people who occupy the positions of authority right now, who are essentially inflicting this humiliating, very damaging, sort of embarrassing ordeal upon our nation.
Now, of course, what you've said, many people will say, yep, that sounds fair enough. But, you know, Charlie, this ain't going to happen, right? I mean, it might be what you ideally, yourself, Rupert Lowe and others, would like to see. Rupert has been agitating for something more robust for a long, long time. We know that Reform UK have, I don't want to be unkind and say diluted it, but Mr Farage did in an interview say it's just not possible to get that amount of people back to their home countries. It's not practical, it's not even doable. And that's always been the argument, isn't it? Labour would make the same argument, even if it was in their DNA to address this, and the Conservatives, not that dissimilar to Labour in this respect, would say the same thing again. They would cite Rwanda, which was only part of the solution, and even that was only a potential because we never saw it happen. So we end up in this strange cul-de-sac, this sort of boomerang effect where it just keeps coming back to the same issue. More and more people are coming here and fewer of them are leaving.
Well, this is the point, Ian, is with so many of the issues that we face as a country today, people, I think in many cases, direct their ire at the wrong people. Because in a lot of cases, those who come to our country legally and illegally are not bad people. They are people who are following incentives. They are frequently people who have come from countries substantially worse than our own. And when they commit crimes, sure, that's on them. And when they bring ideas and values from their countries that don't align with our own, that is also on them. But in a lot of cases, as I say, they're just following incentives. And the people that we should therefore be blaming are the people who have created the conditions that have made this possible in the first place, who have created the incentives. And that is our leaders. That is our leaders, certainly since 1997. And so the first objective of any movement or party that seeks to meaningfully address the problems that are facing our nation right now is to replace the ruling class, is to comprehensively replace those, not just in the elected public-facing element of government in the Commons, but also to replace everyone in the civil service, to replace everybody in every arm of the power structure that governs our country, because it's been so completely, comprehensively captured by this ideology that makes it impossible to do things that are actually in the interests of ordinary British people, that you need that root and branch change in terms of personnel. And only then can you actually address the legislative problems, because it's obviously from those that all of these problems come. And that's why, really, I mean, the only way that we're going to solve this is by electing a patriotic government in 2029. And I think that if we don't do that, we're in for a hell of a time.
Charlie, thank you. Very thorough, passionate stuff from Charlie Downs. He's the campaign director at Restore Britain. Let's speak to Harjap Singh Bangal. Harjap, good afternoon to you. You're a UK immigration lawyer, of course. I'm sure you were picking holes in what Charlie was saying right the way along the line there, or you might slightly agree with him on the civil service. I mean, there's always a few dodge pots that we could replace, perhaps, but maybe that's a whole other argument. The overarching point that he was putting forward to us there's a malign web of legislation that stands in the way of doing anything about the hotel crisis, or do you even see it as a crisis?
Well, there obviously is concerns with people, and that's why people are on the streets. The fact is, though, let's break this down. It's not legislation's fault. It's the fault of the machinery of the executive. We've spoken so many times, Ian, about how the Home Office is not fit for purpose and how it's broken, and it's still that way. When you make laws, you need an executive which is competent to enact them. Now, what's happening here, the Home Office, in its wisdom or incompetence, I would like to say, has been taking over the past few years, and for many years, 10, 15 years, ages, and went to decide something which could be decided in a week. So there are claims that have been waiting 2 years for a reply. And in that time, asylum seekers aren't allowed to work. They're not allowed to work, and we have a duty to house them and feed them while their claim is pending. Now, if the claims were decided within a week, we wouldn't have to house them in hotels. We wouldn't have to feed them because they wouldn't be allowed to stay there.
How did it get to... Because we can all... Sorry to interject, Harjap, but just to pick up on specifically that point, because the Tories really did drag their feet on this one and largely are responsible for this ridiculous backlog that we faced. And they would argue that it's not as simple as doing it in a week. You need time, etc. How could something which is... And I appreciate it's not something you could do on a Tuesday afternoon. I know you need some time to process these things, but why is it beyond the wit of mankind to stick your foot on the gas when it comes to processing?
Well, it's not beyond the wit of mankind, Ian, and you've hit the nail on the head. Under Labour, in the previous government, there used to be a fast-track system, and asylum cases were decided in 7 days. Literally, asylum seekers would come in on a Sunday. On Monday, they'd be interviewed. On Wednesday, they'd have their substantive interview. On Friday, they'd get a decision. And if they wanted to appeal, Harmondsworth Detention Centre, which is right opposite Heathrow, used to have a court in the detention centre. Used to have a judge sitting there full time. And so if you appealed, your appeal hearing would be next week, the week after, in that court. And you wouldn't have to go anywhere. And it'd be dealt there and then. That's a fast-track system. Now, Labour has announced they're reintroducing that. And Labour has announced a lot of countries now put on a list where they will say that, you know what, you won't get a right to appeal until you've been deported. So it's deport first, appeal later. But however, the fact is there's no way to detain 30,000 people. Our detention spaces are about 2,500, 3,000 at a push. So there's no way we're going to, if we kick these people out, we can't detain them in centres.
But we can't have 32,000 people in hotels, can we? The fact we've got 111,000 claiming asylum, many of those people, many of those asylum claims, you'll know this better than me, Harjap, they happen for people who came on a work visa, for example, and then decided at the end of it they were going to put in a claim for asylum. I mean, that's a little bit moody. It doesn't pass the sniff test, that one.
Well, it's interesting that Pakistanis form the largest amount of people who claim asylum, yet are not in the small boat numbers.
Yeah, I think Pakistanis are also the largest amount that were refused asylum as well.
That's right, they were indeed. So these are cases that can be fast-tracked. People who come on visas and then claim asylum can be fast-tracked. Indians who come on visas or Bangladeshis who come on visas, they can all be fast-tracked in that case. And I think Labour is looking to do that. They've got form for doing it before. And they used to, as a result, send back 60,000 people a year. Now, 50,000 people coming in a year isn't a problem if you're sending 60,000 back.
Sure.
Under the Tories, that return's whittled down so much, and the lack of processing of asylum claims. You might remember a story from a few years ago, Ian, where they went to a warehouse which the Home Office had got, and they found literally stacks of files just there, untouched.
Yes. Yeah.
And in these warehouses. And they weren't even touched. So the Tories, they just stopped processing them at one stage. What we need is faster processing. You need a system which is fit for purpose. The Home Office is where political careers go to die. If we look at people who've been in charge of the Home Office before.
100%. 100%.
Right.
So there's some synergy between what you and Charlie Downs were saying, actually, in that respect.
Well, in the fact, the executive's not fit enough to do what this country or the government wants it to do. So the Home Office is not fit for purpose. Sure. It needs to be restructured. It needs to be, totally from head to toe. The people in charge are not experts. You've got gap year students deciding asylum claims, and they decide them wrongly and then create rights of appeal. You've got, people with 4 weeks training told to decide. These are complex matters on human rights.
100%. But is there just an overarching question, Harjap?
Yeah.
Just final point on this. Some might not unreasonably say, if in a year we've had 111,000 people, over 1/10 people applying for asylum, then something's gone wrong. That people who've travelled across many countries and specifically aimed at this one in such large numbers suggests that, as Emmanuel Macron said, there is an attraction to come into this country. It's not perfect. I know you only get 40-odd quid and even only a tenner if you're having your food and stuff supplied to you. So I'm not suggesting people are having it off royally and walking around in Prada trainers or anything like that, but there is still a big magnetism here. People want to come here. It's nonsense to think 111,000 people all came here because they were escaping some tyrannical regime.
It doesn't matter how many people come here, Ian, because if you've got a system that can decide who can stay here and who can't and do it quickly, it doesn't matter. Your system is decided to deal with the numbers. The fact is, when word gets out, you know what, you're going to stay there 2 years before we even get a decision. Then that does add. This is what the agents or the people who are people smugglers use as a selling point. Go to the UK. We're the only ones who can get you there. Once you're there, claim asylum. They won't decide your claim for 2 years.
Yeah.
And you can work in the black economy. Now, remember, these people haven't got insurance numbers, so they can't work. They're all working in the gig economy.
Of course they
right?
are.
They're working in cash in hand. And that's the fault of the government. The government won't let them work, and therefore it's almost like saying this here. Right, GCSE students, if they sat an exam like they have in August, and we said to them, you can't get your results or A-level students till 2 years' time, but in the meantime, you're not allowed to go to uni either or continue education. There'd be mayhem on the streets because you'd have all these people with nothing to do.
And no money as well.
And they'd be stuck.
Listen,
now, is it the fault of the...
On that point, Harjap, you actually froze on us then as well at that point, but thank you. Points all taken. Harjap Singh Bangal, UK immigration lawyer. Many people would just counter all of that and say, well, none of these people should be here in the first place. That's the biggest problem. Stop monkeying around trying to work out what you do when people are here. Concentrate on not being here to start with. Stephen Barrett, also a lawyer and a writer and broadcaster. Stephen, good afternoon to you. You heard some, I'm sure, of what Harjap Singh Bangal had to say. Is there another way? 32,000 people in hotels, 111 who've have claimed asylum in the last year, which is just jaw-dropping. What are we meant to do about it, and where would we put all of these people? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. If we wanted to, we could seal our border. This is getting to joke country time. Our government is supposed to be able to react within hours and minutes to an invasion of our land by a foreign force. We are supposed to be a grown-up nation that can defend itself, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with sealing our border. We have a sea border, which is traditionally easier to seal than a land border, just on the basic matters of running a country. Yeah. But we have all been led so merrily along this path of utter insanity that we have been conditioned that for some reason we can't seal our border. That's when we all started to go mad. And then when we started to say we have to take hundreds of thousands of people from across the planet, well, why? We're already a diverse country, which is a point I like to continually make. You know, my child goes to a school with a lot of diversity in it, and I read to and would protect with my life any of those children. That's what we do. We're a good, beautiful, lovely, loving country. But we don't have to accept endless amounts of young men from across the globe. And it doesn't matter where they're coming from. We just don't need to accept them. Yeah. And you know, they are coming for the freebies. I think you were a bit generous, really, in saying that they don't get to live the life of Riley. A lot of us don't get to go to 4-star hotels, you know?
Sure, that's a fair point.
I mean, and some of the food on offer, I mean, it looks absolutely lovely. It's stunning buffets I've seen. You know, and this is just, why are we doing this? There seems to be at the core of this an absolute misunderstanding amongst the elite that there is some sort of moral obligation to just let people into your country. Now, let's just take that down to the granular level, Ian. I don't have a moral obligation to let somebody into my house. I get to pick who comes into my house because it is my house. It's not my country, quite rightly, so, you know, let's all of us get together and decide what we do with our country, but it is our country, and we do get to decide who comes in and who doesn't. And this idea that our obligation is to process them faster is just nonsense. Our obligation is to put them back where they came from and to stop them coming.
But there's never been a real political will for that, has there, Stephen? It's never really been there. I mean, politicians wheel out their sort of vacuous platitudes on this stuff. We're going to be strict. And listen to Kemi Badenoch speaking this week about Epping. You'd think she hadn't been in government and her party for the previous 14 years. It's not in the heart of mainstream politics. There are other parties coming on the far side that are suggesting they will deal with it, but up to now, it's simply not been there.
Yes, and that's because we've been led along this path and our decency has been used against us. Our goodness has been weaponized against us. None of us want to be called a racist. And a point I like to make about that is if you are genuinely a racist, you don't mind being called a racist because you think racism makes sense. You're pro-racism. So it doesn't matter to you. Only the people who aren't racist care about being called racist. So we all cared about that. That was used against us. Frankly, we are quite loving and caring people as a nation, and we would quite like to look after people. Look at the reaction to Ukraine. But compare this with the reaction to Ukraine. The government is in an absolutely emergency position, one of its own, entirely of its own making. I have absolutely no sympathy for it. Yvette Cooper has made a pig's ear of this, but they are in an emergency situation. In Ukraine, when we were in an emergency situation, we asked the nation to open its heart and to open our homes. And many of us opened our homes to Ukrainian refugees. They won't even ask us to do that with these young men because they know that something terrible will happen. They just know it. This is not innocent Ukrainian women and children fleeing conflict. This is grifters and young men who frankly are committing or are allegedly committing large numbers, because we have innocent until proven guilty, which is more important than migration. I'm not giving up innocent until proven guilty till I'm in the cold, cold ground, Ian. But allegedly are committing vast amounts of criminality. And the government aren't asking us to open up our homes because they know that won't work. They've broken planning laws. And that's what the case was about last week. Yep. They've completely messed it up. Made a mess of this, and they don't know where to go. And this launch of this alleged appeal now, again, it took them ages to get that. It looks like a knee-jerk nonsense. They weren't even a party to the case, Ian. They could have made themselves a party. They appear to have basically turned up on the day at the last minute and begged the judge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, and they're the government.
These are the people in charge. I mean, you can't write this stuff. Listen, Stephen, we have to stop there just for time, but again, love the passion on this and just the basic common sense approach to, look, it is our country. We have a distinct advantage over most other European countries, in fact, most countries around the world. There's some exceptions, Australia being the obvious one, but we're not landlocked. We are an island. If ever there was an example of things that go in your favour when it comes to protecting your border, you mean a 6-year-old might even volunteer. Well, if you were an island, surely you're in a slightly better position than if you were, I don't know, Luxembourg, stuffed in the middle of stuff, for example. 0344 499 1000. The question remains, if all those hotels closed, where do you put 32,000 people? This is Talk.
has its way. And
I mean, what happened yesterday could seriously undermine the government's national plan. As you mentioned, we got Labour-run Rural Council, but also Tamworth as well, and they both said that they are actively considering legal action against the Home Office over the use of these hotels. And it was quite interesting what your listener said, because you just read out his message where he said, if these hotels close and they're on 3-year contracts, are we still going to pay for these hotels even if they close?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of comment coming through. 5 to 2. Where should 32,000 people go? Let's get a voice note from Elle.
We always make the assumption that if you're housing them, you're going to put them somewhere that's got windows and doors and, was habitable as a hotel or whatever. They should just use unused warehousing. You can put racking in. You can have probably in the normal size warehouse, you probably have about six floors put in there. They don't need any natural light because the government changed the rules on that, meaning that because they wanted to transform old commercial units into dwellings. So there is no rules on natural light now that there used to be. So old warehousing, and it doesn't have to be near anybody then.
Fair point. This from Sean in Bridlington, who says Harjap, that was our lawyer, is being disingenuous. How can we let illegal migrants work when they are lying about who they are, where they're from, and we have no way of knowing their history? Completely fair point. Would you want to employ someone if you knew nothing about them? Here's another voice note from Dave in Basildon.
In answer to your question, where'd you put 32,000 illegal immigrants? Now the hotels should all be closed, if they don't reverse it, that is. Each and every single one of them should have their identity taken down and DNA tested, put back on boats and sent straight over back to France. Deported. The answer is we don't put them nowhere. They're not welcome here. If they want to come here, do it the legal way, not illegal. Illegal is breaking the law.
As simple as that. Dave, thank you very much indeed for that. This is Nick down in London on this issue. Nick, how are you doing?
I am very well, sir, and I trust you are too.
Good at this end. What are your thoughts?
Perfect answer for this. Well, every Labour MP that voted against the Rwanda scheme, they get one migrant for their homes. every MP, Gary Lineker gets a 20 for a special bonus. Every lawyer who appears for these people in their various appeals, they get a migrant living with them. The supporters of Arsenal Football Club, they all get a migrant living with them. Arsenal take sponsor money from Rwanda, so I don't see why not. So that way,
I see the owners of Arsenal going on. What have we done wrong here?
When you take sponsor money from Rwanda,
I get it.
which is apparently a really unsafe place, so why are you taking sponsorship?
Apparently so.
Money from them.
From unsafe places.
Ian, I'm being flippant here.
No, but I hear you.
But the point is, we're in this mess up because the governing classes don't suffer the effects of their rank, stupid decision making. And until and unless the governing classes actually feel some of the pain that we all get because of their stupid choices, it's never going to change.
It's never going to change. And it's not an unreasonable proposition. When you put that to be, I can see, I know the left wing kind of, I saw a broadcaster was told this the other day on another radio station, well, you should take in a migrant. And he was like, well, how would that solve the problem? Well, your passions are so heightened on this specific issue that it's not inconsistent with your views and your tolerance levels and your beliefs that you would be asked to take in a migrant. You've explained that, it's a no-brainer in terms of, you know, looking after vulnerable people. So, yeah, put your head above the parapet and do it. Nick, I've got to move, but great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. This one comes in from John in Liverpool. Love your shows, but Stephen Barrett is wrong. That was our lawyer. I've been called racist many times because of my views. Racist, teaching my teenage daughter how to stay safe on the street, how to take her phone out, who to stay away from, doing it with a smile. It's water off a duck's back now. I won't let her become a statistic, or me for that matter, for fear of being called a racist. Good point, John. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. Shed loads of calls on this. Where do we put 32,000 people? Our lines are open. Let's get the news headlines at 2.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yes, welcome back to the programme. Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon into a bank holiday. It's going to be busy on the roads, but we're here on Talk to completely keep you company, the home of common sense. What are we talking about here this afternoon? Well, that record 111,000 asylum seekers under Labour has sparked nationwide protests. 27 protests planned across the country over the next few days following that Epping hotel ruling, rising small boat arrivals and 32,059 migrants in hotels, straining communities, visa renewals and extended stays also on the increase. The question is this: if every single one of those hotels closed tomorrow, what do you do with 32,000 people? Serious question. Where would they all go? Certainly in the interim period. Details to come. Also, the number of young jobless women has hit 450,000. That is the highest in nearly 10 years. Youth unemployment rises under Labour's jobs tax. Critics call for state-backed apprenticeships and entrepreneur support. Has there ever been a time when there is a sunny uplands of possibility for younger people? Maybe not. And the Home Office has awarded £1 million contracts for emergency tents to store up to 700 bodies, deployable within 5 days. Critics question the need for such measures amid substantial terrorism threats and diseases like MERS and Ebola. Yeah, it's contingency planning in case everything goes pear-shaped, essentially. More on that in just a few moments. 0344 499 1000. There's one from Margaret. Will there ever come a time when the government says it's impossible, we cannot take any more people into this country? There has to be a limit. And it's rather interesting. It does rather go back, whether you're left-wing, right-wing, doesn't really matter. But surely we'd all agree there is a sort of degree of groupthink that seems, and this goes beyond just this country, and if you certainly take a bloc like the EU, there is obviously political reasons why there's groupthink, because there are agreed policies and diktats from the collective nations within it. But even sort of prior to that, there is a sort of Western idea of how governments are meant to do business. And no one dares muck with the system or mess with the system. You just it would keep it like this. Everybody understands it. The civil servants, be they in Germany, France, Spain or the UK, they all understand it. The main parties understand it. Let's not meddle. Let's just keep things nicely. No one really, I think, looks for... running governments is actually quite hard work, believe it or not, whether you're in the civil service or the actual government. It takes a lot. So the last thing you want to start doing is messing around with the system and almost trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's why we often end up with these kind of curious Gordian knot moments in politics, as no one really has the kahunas to say we need substantial change on just how we do business. And that might be the answer to things. I heard one former Labour peer, Lord Glassman, actually say the other day on an interview he'd abolish the Treasury and move the Treasury essentially into number 10. I mean, the Treasury it works very independent of the Prime Minister. It's surprising. We'll remember how autonomous Gordon Brown was in the Tony Blair years. Give us a clue, Gordon, he once said, one day before a budget. He didn't know what was in it. And he was arguing that you need to just lose the Treasury in its current form, get it into number 10. And no one can say you need that many bods in the 21st century running things. If you needed 30,000 people in 1975, you don't need 30,000 people in 2025, right? Groupthink. Status quo. These are the enemies of progress, maybe. 0344 499 1000. And here's an area that has a connecting sort of interest in terms of a big government department. This is the Home Office. Spent £1 million on mass fatality tents, which could store up to 700 bodies in case of emergency. This sparks fears, of course, of undisclosed threats, naturally. Terrorism risks are still substantial. Disease concerns like Ebola. Are the government hiding something, or is this just standard fare? Who knows? Let's speak to a man who knows this territory well. Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Danny, good afternoon to you. I mean, when you read that there was actually some job adverts, I'm sure you saw these, saying, anyone want to apply for this contract, we need the tents and all that goes with it in case, you need to either refrigerate or keep or store 700 bodies. And I was reading that thinking, man, is there something we don't know here? Is something hiding around the corner, Danny, or is this just standard practice?
Afternoon, Ian. It's a bit alarming, isn't it? At first sight, you do think, what is the Home Office not telling us?
Yeah.
But I think actually the truth is, it's rather more prosaic than that. It's a bit mundane and a bit routine. I think what the Home Office is doing is it's had a contract, I think, for the past couple of years to provide contingency support to local authorities should there be some terrible event, another pandemic or a terrible terrorist atrocity or some other major event that causes a huge loss of life. And it's just having those contingencies to be able to offer support to local authorities if they need tents or storage compounds of some kind. Some of it would be refrigerated so that bodies can be kept and stored and all the appropriate procedures can be gone through. So it's doing those things, those kind of boring things that don't really get any headlines unless when there is some terrible incident and there is a pandemic, everyone says, well, where was the preparation? Why didn't you plan for this? I mean, that's what we've got a COVID inquiry partly for at the moment is, who's been looking at the preparations or the lack of preparations and the warnings that, a pandemic might be coming and we weren't prepared for it. So I suppose it's the kind of although the headline looks rather shocking, it's something that's fairly routine and standard and probably quite sensible.
Without sounding too macabre about it, Danny, when I read this, I oddly, I thought, well, if you were preparing for something substantial, a big outbreak or, you know, some kind of horrendous terror attack, then 700 doesn't seem that many, to be honest.
I'm not quite sure where they get the number from.
Yes, I wonder whether is there some kind of science behind the number, I wonder.
You know, I don't know. I imagine there is some kind of science behind it. There's some kind of calculation about the level of capacity that local authorities have already, and they do have some capacity, and then what the Home Office could do in addition. And then perhaps there are some plans, you know, that could tide you over for a certain length of time. And then if they needed to procure more storage facilities, then they could do that. But, you know, it seems to me that this is, you know, fairly sensible. The Home Office is saying the capability has existed since 2005 and it has been maintained under all governments. So this isn't something that Labour has just conjured up, it would seem. But it's something that, you know, in the event that it's needed, it's there. Whether that be, as we said, a terrorist atrocity or a pandemic or some other natural disaster. And obviously, you know, we know that the weather seems to be getting more extremes. It's possible that there could be something of that ilk as well.
Danny, always great, thorough stuff from you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator, former advisor to the Home Secretary. Let's speak with Professor David Alexander, Professor of Emergency Planning and Management at the UCL. Afternoon to you, David.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you're listening to some of this because this is territory you know very well, thinking, you know, this is why they do it. They'd be damned if they did, damned if they didn't. Is this, firstly, this is standard stuff in a Western democracy, shall we say, right?
It absolutely is. I can remember when I was on a regional resilience forum in 2004, we were debating this, but we didn't have any money to do anything about it. One thing to bear in mind here is that after the Indian Ocean tsunami, 492 Swedes dead were repatriated to Sweden. The mortuary service couldn't cope with it. There was chaos and the government fell in the ensuing scandal. This is really quite important. London has had a mass fatality plan since about 2005. It put it into action during the London bombings when 52 people in London were killed and 4 terrorists. There is a reason for this, and the reason is that you need to do autopsies and recognition of bodies collectively. You don't disperse the bodies to different places. That's very important. And this is a service for the living, not for the dead. It's a service for the bereaved families and so on. And it needs to be done with great sensitivity and great care.
And so forensically speaking, this is also about protecting evidence. Would that be fair?
It's about identifying bodies where that may be necessary, and it's about collecting evidence, and it's about the future of safety, because we need to know how people died, why they died, and what the circumstances were.
Yeah,
and that will be true for disease as well.
Of course. And when it comes to threats, I mean, you know, you can always sit there and plan for many, many threats, and then one comes around the corner that you haven't planned for. But I suppose that's the random nature of life.
We try to use foresight here, and we try to look at things that might or might not happen. We try to project the trends into the future and see whether these things are likely to become more probable than they are at present. And we try to be as ready as we can without being excessive in our demands for resources.
In terms of numbers, is there any specific science behind the number 700? 700 bodies could be stored in these fatality tents.
I would say none whatsoever. It's probably related to the amount of space required. In a mortuary, you have to have a wet area and a dry area. You have to have an area for looking after the relatives if they come along to identify the bodies. You have to have an area which is suitable for funeral services to come and pick up the bodies, and so on and so forth. That's a lot of space. London has identified, I think, 11 places where the temporary mortuary can be put up if needed. I don't think they could necessarily cope with much more than this. But the important thing is that they do the very best they can if we are in the unfortunate situation of having a mass casualty event, whatever it may be. But let's also remember that pandemics are recurrent.
True.
Influenza pandemics have about a 40-year cycle.
What are the sort of areas in your work, David, and your research that you look at and can? I mean, is there a kind of a type of emergency that is appearing to be more possible than others?
That is extremely hard to say, but let's remember that in the British National Risk Register, pandemics have always been top of the list as worst consequences and most likely. The register started in 2008. It's been revised roughly every 2 years, a bit irregularly, but anyway, the latest edition is of this year. And in all of the editions, pandemics are top of the list. Now, pandemics are variable in terms of their fatality rate, also in terms of their transmissibility, your chance of getting it, if you get it, your chance of dying. But we have to be ready for situations where we might be in the worst of those cases, as we were in 1918, 1920, very lethal and very easy to transmit.
Well, we all keep our fingers crossed, hoping none of these things happen, of course.
Well,
that's the peculiarity of your job, I suppose, and those that take on the contracts for this kind of stuff. Listen, David, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. Professor David Alexander, he's Professor of Emergency Planning and Management at the UCL. I mean, I do kind of get it. Look, they've planned for this, as he said, 20 years. They've had these kind of specific contingency plans. Fatality tends to store multiple hundreds of bodies in case something horrendous happens, be it a terror attack or, more likely, some other kind of pandemic. This one from Alison in Kent, who says, when I saw the government were ordering tents, I was hoping that common sense had finally prevailed and they were for housing migrants. Oh, well, it was a nice thought and would be so much cheaper for us taxpayers. Dream on. That's very good connecting of the two subjects. Love it. Vince in West Sussex, what have you got for us, Vince? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, it's just regarding, obviously, immigration. It's high on the agenda at the moment, believe it or not. We need deterrence. That goes without saying. And I feel that we've got one deterrent that's not, I think, has been considered but never used, the Navy. Turning boats back in international waters. I don't think there's any problem with that. Personally, I can't see it's breaking any. You're not putting them in danger because they're going to go another 11 miles. So if they go 11 miles in the other direction, there's no difference. Secondly, advertise the fact that if people arrive in this country with no identification whatsoever, they should not be considered for asylum. Now, that would be a good deterrent because these people are turning up with, they're claiming to be 12-year-olds and yet they're closer to 50 probably. They've got no ID whatsoever. We just don't know who they are. Now, in that situation, if they've got no form of ID, whichever it may be, okay, it could be fake, fair play. However, it's a deterrent. It means they've got to do something more than just get on a dinghy and sail over. And with the Navy halfway across the channel, in the middle, with water cannons maybe, just to fire in front of the boats and make the water a bit rougher or, make them a bit wet.
So essentially the pull factor, and there is a huge pull factor to come into this country. I know that we don't... I saw the figures last night. Asked Germany, France, Spain, whatever. I think we were 5th on the list of countries in terms of recorded asylum claims or something of that nature, whatever it happened to be. We know, regardless of that, there is a huge attraction to coming here, Vince. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's anybody can see that.
Yeah, but if you make it plain up front that okay, you can arrive here, but if you've got no ID, you are not even going to be considered for asylum, which means you can be then returned without asylum.
What do you do though when somebody is, because as it stands at the moment, the law doesn't require you to have any identification at all if you're applying for asylum, because the theory goes that if you've escaped, someone was about to shoot your head off, the last thing you stopped for was to go back to your bedroom to find your passport. You ran. That's the theory. I don't think it's quite the truth in practice, but you take the point.
No. I understand that. But the thing is, it's about, again, deterrence.
Yeah.
If you advertise this fact up front across all the social media platforms, it would have an effect. Okay, it's not going to stop it. I grant that. You're still going to have the
no, but I think it would stop some of it, though, Vince, don't you? I mean, I genuinely think, why would you be making your way... I know it's the old argument, making your way through multiple countries, but that's not an irrelevant point, is it? If I was escaping, I genuinely believe this, if I lived in, I don't know, Italy, for example, and suddenly the government wanted to kill me and shoot my family up and everyone in our town, I think I would stop, Vince, at the first country that offered me safe haven, right? I don't think I'd go, right, thanks, France, I'm off to Germany now, and then I'm off to Belgium, and then I'm off to the UK.
Yeah, and that is a problem Europe-wide, which obviously we don't have a great bearing on now because we're not in the EU. But I believe some countries in the EU are slowly sorting out their arrival policies, which is deterring people from going there.
Sure.
That's why they're heading for Britain. We have no deterrent, one iota of deterrent at all.
There it is, Vince.
We had a brief one, which was obviously Rwanda, which was obviously the Labour Party didn't like, but they've not offered anything in...
Well, no, they did the classic thing. It's like getting rid of the cane at school, wasn't it? Fine, get rid of the cane, but nothing replaced it. So, and if you don't have something to replace it, where there is this almost sword of Damocles kind of sense that if you cross that line, then this happens. And they didn't replace it with anything. They just started wanging on about smashing the gangs, wasn't it? Nickley Pickley says, Stephen Barrett is a barrister, not a lawyer. Hang on. A barrister is a lawyer, right? We ask our guests how they want to be introduced, by the way. He says lawyer and writer. So you'd have to take it up with Stephen. However, a lawyer is a general term for either a solicitor or a barrister, isn't it? That's what I always thought. You're lawyering. Interchangeable. 0344, I'm sure there's a lawyer listening who can put us right on that. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
That appalling morning last year when we all discovered the extent and the brutality and the depravity of Axel Rudabakana's rampage, which of course killed 3 young girls and nearly killed another 8. That the state described
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 past 2. Let's go to Daniel in Epsom. Always has a robust view on things like immigration. Daniel, good afternoon.
All right, Ian, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I thought, as I said that, I thought, what if it's a different Daniel when I speak to you? Who's got a completely different view, some sort of left-wing dodgepot that's going to sort of start telling me we need to double the amount of people in hotels.
I wouldn't. That's not me, mate. You know that.
No, I know that. Absolutely, I do. Where do we put 32,000 people, Dan?
I think what we need to do is we need to make it much more unattractive to be here. I think we also need to make them aware as well that the majority of Britons don't want them here. I think we need to make them feel uncomfortable. I think it needs to be tenanted accommodation or even worse. I don't think they should get phones. I think we should not give them pocket money. I think we should essentially give them the bare essentials to live and keep them under house arrest. This is about... I would also, if I was in charge, if I had a government position, I would disband Care for Calais. I'd bring down their website. I would make it extremely clear from the outset that the majority of British people don't want you here, and we're going to go out of our way to make you feel unwelcome. It's like they do in Poland. The reason that Poland and Hungary, one, they enforce their borders, but two, they do what the Polish government do what the Polish people demand. The Hungarian government do what the Hungarian people demand. Our government does not do what the majority of British people demand, and that's the big difference. I just want to make them feel uncomfortable, unwelcome, and they basically need to know that the majority of Brits don't want them here. We don't want illegal immigration, and we think it's a cancer on our society. It's getting bigger and bigger. It's costing more and more money, and it's ruining the place.
I was kind of sort of slightly smiling as you said all of that, Dan, because I was thinking of the archetypal lefty choking on their chai latte as you were sort of suggesting this. But it went back to what I was saying about half an hour ago about groupthink. There's this kind of almost a settled view on how you have to view asylum. Now, when you said everything you said there, it was strong stuff, but then it wasn't really. I was thinking after each sentence you just said there, which you did brilliantly, it's not really strong stuff, is it? It's quite logical stuff. And it's only that we've been educated or taught that, no, there's only one reaction to this. You have to have this reaction. And if you don't have this reaction, therefore you're an uncaring old B-end, you're not worth the... And of course, no, we've got to stop the groupthink. We've got to start thinking rationally. You're not being personal to an individual. You're talking about the overarching problem, right? Which is, the problem has to be, it's not that you don't like, Bob or Mohammed or whoever it happens to be, because we don't know them. I'm sure they're very nice people, but that's not the argument. And that's the problem the left have, because they personalise it rather than look at what is a massive problem in this country for so many reasons: economic, social cohesion, cultural, everything. That's the terms of the argument that we've got to change, isn't it?
Well, the problem that the left have, and the people that are trying to force this woke agenda down students' throats and down the majority view, is that's not how most people think. And most people that are over the age of, say, 45, that knew I was an adult in 1997, so I can remember what the country was like when it was better, and it was safer, and it was cleaner, and we had about a quarter of less population, and the roads weren't so busy. And I can remember it, Britain, and I'm only 48, and I can remember it. The young people don't remember it. I do. And I've got children. I'm a higher rate taxpayer. I've got 3 young children, and I can see them inheriting a future that's worse than it is today.
And that's not meant to be the direction of travel, is it?
Yeah, well, that's why the government can't pee on my shoes and tell me it's raining, because I know the difference, right? And I think most people up and down Britain think like me. And this is why Reform are going to take over the Welsh Senate, and they're going to, in about 2 or 3 years' time, when an early general election's called, the people are going to demand. If you ignore the majority of British people's wishes for long enough, you will get civil unrest, and you will get problems on the streets like we're seeing, and they'll grow and grow and exacerbate, because you're not doing what we're asking you to do. And you're not representing, you're supposed to, but you're not representing the British majority view.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, Ian, the natives are restless and we've had enough. And I can tell you, the fight back has begun.
Well, this weekend it's going to be rather telling. There's 27 protests that are planned and who knows what else. Listen, Daniel, thank you. Daniel in Epsom, always a very honest call. We're going to talk to Rosemary in a couple of moments' time. But before we go any further, it is a bank holiday weekend, of course, which means we're off and back on Tuesday after this one. I'll let you know who's filling in a moment. I do know, and it's kind of forgotten for a second. But it means the roads are going to be busy. It means there's a lot going on out there in terms of travel. It means trains could be chocker. It means that if you're going on a ferry over to France, they could be busier than usual. But of course, predominantly, the one thing that really gets us all is the car journey, particularly if you've got kids or a dog with you or something like that. It's tricky. We know it's tricky. It's never going to be easy. Our roads can be gridlocked any day of the week. You start to shoehorn a bank holiday weekend into the conversation and you're looking at, I mean, it's just so, it's soul destroying, isn't it? Being stuck in relentless traffic. It's soul destroying because there's nothing you can do about it. And then you put on the news and you listen to the data and you discover that the tailback is, I don't know, 7 hours wait for something that would normally take you 2 hours to get to. And it's interesting we talk about this because our very own Kevin O'Sullivan is trying to make his way down to Cornwall in a car, Kev, his wife, and I think I'm right in saying, Kev, a dog as well.
Have you got me in?
Can you hear us, Kev?
What the hell? Yeah, I can. Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you, and that's all we want to do, really, is just look at you all day, Kevin, because you're a beautiful,
well,
it's a beautiful
if
thing.
We pan the camera around. What we're just past Bristol on the M5, so we're heading down towards Exeter. We should reach Exeter sometime tomorrow, probably about the afternoon, I would say, because we are sitting in a car park now. It's,
well, we've got the we've got the Kev tracker on, as you can see. I mean, the progress is. I mean, how long have you been on the road now, Kevin?
No, do you know what is so far? Until we got to Bristol, it was surprisingly good. Poor old Mark Dolan called me earlier and he wanted me to do the terrible traffic jam story. Unfortunately, at the time, we were gliding down the motorway around about 80 miles an hour.
That's illegal.
So it was pretty good until we got to Bristol. We've just turned off onto the M5. And it is no longer pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty bad doesn't even begin to cover it. It's very gridlocky now.
I've just looked at the database because obviously I'm sitting here like some Bond character with a joystick following your journey, Kevin, and you're penciled in to arrive a week on Tuesday.
As I say, yeah. As I say, we're hoping. Well, that's optimistic. I think that's optimistic.
Now, it's not just you. You're not on your own, of course, illegally filming yourself.
I'm with my camera woman, my wife, Henrietta.
Yep, and is the dog with you as well?
And Chaz is in the back seat.
Does he do a bit of driving if you get tired?
Chaz has been very well behaved. Henrietta, not so much.
Well, she's always tricky on a car journey, Henrietta, isn't she?
Yeah. I'm going to be honest here. We both are. I said to Mark Dolan, you know, we live in Hampstead. Our first argument happened before we'd got out of Hampstead. So, seriously, I'm not joking. So there's been a few flashpoints and the traffic doesn't help.
I love that. I love that. Are you stopping off on the way? You're doing the... Or do you do the kind of, we're just going to go there and get there and avoid all the stop-offs and the services?
Well, no, I mean, we're going to stop at the next service station for the dog's sake.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, normally I want to get there as quickly as I can. Actually, I've got to say now, Ian, we've just broken free a bit. We are now doing a heady 25 miles an hour. So,
wow. So
things are really starting to happen, mate, I'll tell you.
Things are looking up. Listen, we're going to keep in touch. We're going to follow the journey. Drive safely, Kevin, and lots of love to Henrietta and, of course, to Chaz as well. He's our very own Kevin O'Sullivan. We've got the tracker. Can we have a look at the tracker again for those who are watching us visually? The Kev tracker, following Kev's journey from from London, from Hampstead in London. That's where he is so far. He's trying to get down there to Exeter. It's looking at the moment, he's just had a moment, just a little moment, a chink of light as he began to speed up again. But you know the motorways do that, don't they? They give you that false sense of security. Go, yeah, I'm home and dry, we're back. And then bang, up it comes again. Speed limit, 40 miles an hour. It's like, really? 21st century on a motorway? Are you having a laugh, mate? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Nat, who says a possible solution to housing 35,000 illegals could be to use areas around disused airfields, get the MOD to secure the perimeter, build some form of secure barracks within the perimeter for the illegals, put in place those fast-track courts your previous guest talked about. If somebody is unsuccessful, stick them on a plane and remove them. You could even have specific sites for different nationalities to maximise plane space to any given or should that be nationality? Maybe it's not from Nat. Any given Nat, it says. So either way, point is made. We've got to get Daniel in Epsom brilliantly, and he often does, articulate something so fundamental and crucial to this argument. I've talked for months now, years probably, about what is the most effective way to win the argument, okay? And the problem is, if you are seen to be on the right or even the centre right, you're kind of written off by, I won't just say the left, but by the kind of liberal establishment as being uncaring or a lack of understanding. I both care and understand. I also know that the left don't have the monopoly on caring, and your definition of what caring is might be different to somebody else's. It doesn't mean it usurps or is morally superior to my definition of caring. I think the idea that you get poor people's taxes to house people in their tens of thousands, I care about those poor people's taxes, and I think that comes first. I care about people who've served in the military that are homeless. I care about the vulnerable or the abused in this country that get little or no time to be able to properly articulate and explain their own dilemmas. So don't come along with this kind of one-size-fits-all, you don't care, that's why you want to talk about airfields and tents. No, there's lots of different ways of caring lefties. I'm just putting it out there, all right? 0344 499 1000. Here's another group we should all care about. Number of young jobless women has hit 450,000. That's the highest for nearly 10 years amid rising youth unemployment under Labour. Labour's job tax could be to blame for worsening the crisis, while structural barriers and distractions like social media and gaming keep young people out of work. Who'd have thought it? Let's speak to the UK policy chair of FSB. Tina McKenzie is with us. Tina, you'll have to explain, because no one's told me, what is FSB? Good afternoon to you.
Oh, Federation of Small Businesses, the largest.
Of course it is. The Federation is one of the most famous organisations in the country.
Is. It's the largest business organisation in the UK.
Indeed.
Today. Established over 50 years ago by one guy who was very unhappy about the government bringing in national insurance for self-employed, and that's what started the organisation. So
Wow.
we're still arguing that today.
I wonder what he'd be saying about national insurance today.
Well, it was scrapped for the self-employed, and it was reduced. You know, they've changed the structure of it, but yeah, the increase in national insurance is a problem for us. Although there were a group of the self-employed the small business owners that were kept out of it in the last budget, as you know.
Indeed.
So, but it's still a huge issue. It's still a huge issue. On costs, rising minimum wage, rising taxes. It's an issue for the small business.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And so is this one as well, the number of young jobless women.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a figure that should be going in that direction at this point in the 21st century. It should be going the other way, right?
Yeah. And we did a report on it recently, so we have some statistics on what young women are saying. And what we're seeing is that there's a real lack of support into entrepreneurial businesses, on entrepreneurial enterprises. There's a lack of role models in leadership for women, seeing other people doing it that are like them. And then we see that women have a harder time to get access to finance. Equally, women are having babies and looking at the maternity provision. It isn't great for those who want to go into self-employment. So for us, looking at how we drive kind of more enterprise in the country, we want to get more of those women and those young women that are talented women into setting up their own businesses. And so there's quite a lot of them that are saying they want to do that, but they don't have the support at the moment in the country to go and do it.
That's a good point. And in the self-employed world, of course, having a baby is, a gazillion times more tricky than if you're working for a nice sort of shiny corporation with all sorts of generous packages to look after you, sometimes for a couple of years. You can, as well as the statutory stuff, some companies have their own initiatives that are very attractive. But if you're self-employed, you've started your own thing, then you could be a one-man band. That's really hard.
Yeah, and what happens is on the maternity pay, when they look back to see what you've earned, and it's very different for when you're self-employed, because then it's deducted off universal credit. So you're kind of disadvantaged by being self-employed, even on the statutory route, never mind working for a company that's going to pay your salary anyway. And we know women are going to have babies. So let's support those women. And also what we know is that if we support those women into these businesses, they end up paying taxes. We're not paying for them sitting on the unemployment kind of register, and therefore and indeed it costs us more, because there can be a spiral then, people getting depressed because they're not doing anything, they're sitting at home, and it causes more problems. So it's cheaper for the country, really, in lots of ways, and morally right, to get them back into work or starting their own businesses.
And just looking at the wider numbers here as well, I mean, you've got almost 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in employment, education or training. Now, it's always been a difficult area. I remember back in the 90s, I don't know if you remember this, Tina, but during those early Blair years where everything looked rosy and, even the lollipop lady had a property portfolio, everyone was doing well, you could write a mortgage application on the inside of your leg and get it approved, and, life was good. Blur and Oasis were blurring stuff out. But despite all of that, there was still a big increase in youth unemployment at that time. And I wonder why that was. Is it just I mean, I know stereotypically you can have fun with it and go, well, if you're 16, you're just lazy. Well, of course you're not, but there might be a few gamers out there. Is it just becoming increasingly difficult for young people to settle in the workplace?
Do you know what's really interesting, and this is not just in the UK, this is in America as well and other Western countries, we're seeing a real shift in this thing called economic inactivity, where they're not necessarily defined as unemployed, the way maybe in the 90s people were, you're either employed or unemployed and you got your unemployment benefit. Now you've got economic inactivity, where people are defined as maybe different levels of sickness, incapacity, mental health problems. So it's a whole kind of different group that aren't counted in your traditional unemployment numbers.
Sure.
So that's very different. I think also though, if you look at the apprenticeship scheme, do you remember the youth employment schemes back in those days? Worked really, really well. Now with the apprenticeship schemes, what we've asked, I mean, most of the companies in the UK, over 90% of them are small and medium. Those small and medium British businesses actually employ more than 65% of people, right? So if you can get the small and medium businesses doing more with these young people, it's a winner. They're more likely to hire people who have been sick, more likely to hire people who have been unemployed, people from the local community. So what we're saying to the government is this: why don't you increase the apprenticeship? Instead of paying all these different organisations to do all these schemes, why don't you just say to small businesses up and down the country, you take on a young person, and instead of giving you £1,000, we will give you £3,000 towards their salary in the first year, make them an apprentice, right? We know, we've went out with a survey to small businesses, they've said it make it much easier for them to hire an apprentice if they had a bit more support like that. It's dead simple. And it saves the government a fortune in unemployment benefits, but more importantly, it gets that person, as soon as they're back into some sort of a trend of getting back into the workplace and they get used to it again, then you've broken that cycle. So it really is, and you're better going to the small businesses and saying, open your door, your local pub, you know, hire an apprentice in your local butchers, in your local florist, bring in a young person, we'll give you some money towards it, because we're going to spend 10 times that amount over the next 2 years on benefits, and the longer they're away from the workplace, the harder it is to get them back, because people then really struggle with getting back into a routine of working. So we don't want to lose a generation of 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds. We've got to help them back into work, but we've got to help the businesses, support the businesses, open the doors, give them the training, give them the support, know that they might struggle in the first couple of months, and make it easier for those businesses to invest in them.
Listen, spot on stuff. Tina, I don't think anybody would argue against any of that. That's Tina McKenzie. She is UK Policy Chair for the Federation of Small Business. Thank you to her. Thoughts on that from you? 0344 499 1000. Just a reminder, a couple of bits of breaking news. Just before we went on air, you may remember this. We found out there was some breaking news that the Home Office will seek to appeal against the High Court's refusal to allow it to intervene in the case of the hotel in Epping. It was the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, that made this announcement. Now, Somani Hotels, they're the owner of Bell Hotels in Epping, will appeal against a court order blocking the use of the hotel as accommodation for asylum seekers, the company's solicitors have said. Of course, it wasn't, as far as I know, stand to be corrected on this, it wasn't being used as a hotel before it was used for asylum seekers for a good few years. As I understand it, it was closed down. And then, of course, the government came along and said, oh, can we use this? And the company went, yeah, all right, give us a load of money, and that's how it worked. But of course, that wasn't the use of the hotel. It was licensed to be a hotel, and there was no license or agreement, legally or otherwise, that said that you can now change of use, in the same way that you can't turn your house into an Esso garage because people would go, it's a change of use. Well, all I've got is a petrol pump in the garden, officer. Doesn't really count, does it? Yep, it counts. Anyway, so the hotel, we've got the government who are seeking to appeal, and now the hotel owners that are seeking to appeal as well. And also some other breaking news. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has described the declaration of famine in Gaza City as, quote, utterly horrifying. He's accused the Israeli government of causing a man-made catastrophe. This relationship that we've had with Israel for years, which has been, you know, very close and in pretty much unison, is breaking down by the hour. That's what happens when you put kids in charge of running a country like David Lammy and Keir Starmer. 0344 499 1000.
I mean, what happened yesterday could seriously undermine the government's national plan. As you mentioned, we got Labour-run Rural Council, but also Tamworth as well, and they both said that they are actively considering legal action against the Home Office over the use of these hotels. And it was quite interesting what your listener said, because you just read out his message where he said, if these hotels close and they're on 3-year contracts, are we still going to pay for these hotels even if they close?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Was I meant to say something then? I can't remember. Are we doing something at this point? Are we? Is it Voice of Doom? Am I too early for the Voice of Doom? It's now, isn't it? I mean, is it honestly? Have you just written that up there as I said it? I kind of like this week, because I was off on Wednesday. I've that thing of when you take a day off or there's a bank holiday, it sort of plays havoc with your head. And I woke up this morning, I genuinely didn't know if it was Saturday, Tuesday, or what the hell was going on. And now I just lost an hour. And I thought, have we been on air an hour? Nearly 2 hours. Which means at this time, there's only one thing that happens, and in fact we'd be off-commed, as we say in the business, if we didn't do this. And that's the Voice of Doom, of course, because we're on day 18. So for 17 days, nobody has got this right. I'm hopeful somebody's going to do it today. So it's a mystery voice, but a political one, right? It's always a politician. Mystery voice, no one's got it for 17 days. Can we get it on the air? As we move and slide into a bank holiday, can we get a winner today? Have a listen to the voice.
I certainly have things to say.
Right, you've got to go way back. Think 70s, probably 60s, I'd imagine. We'll get a bit more detail to give you some clues over the coming weeks if it doesn't go. Who is this?
I certainly have things to say.
Let's hear it again.
I certainly have things to say.
And again.
I certainly have things to say.
It's not Ian Duncan Smith. You've got to go way back. So 60s, 70s, that neck of the woods, that sort of area. It's a stinker of a voice in the sense that I can't imagine without an ample amount of cluage anyone is ever going to get that correct. Jay says, I'm a gamer and work... Oh, let's hear it again.
I certainly have things to say.
87222 if you want to have a crack at that. Jay says, I'm a gamer and work 48 hours a week. Jamie in Manchester. So, yeah, I think the point being you can do both. Depends what you're gaming with. Depends what you're doing. I mean, are you playing Steel or Brain Rot? Because... I mean, if you're not playing Steel or Brain Rot, frankly, you're not welcome round these parts. Let's go to the calls. This will be Leslie in Llandudno in North Wales. Leslie, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Hi. So I'm not very cheery.
You're not very chess, all right? We don't mind. We're quite a morose bunch at this end from day to day, so not a problem. You're in good company.
So I'm 61, and I don't think that this migrant vote crisis will end in my lifetime.
Interesting.
I just think there's too much stacked against, this.
Yep.
I think, firstly, I don't think we'll ever come out of the ECHR again in my lifetime, because that is such a huge and monumental thing to do. I just cannot see it happening.
There was, I think I read something this morning, Leslie, that Kemi Badenoch is going to announce at the Conservative Party conference, they're still going, the Conservative Party, by the way, she's going to announce that they will leave the ECHR. I'm sure I read that. Is that going to make a difference, though? Because she's not likely to win the next election, is she?
Well, I highly doubt it. And even if they did, I mean, they've still got to get it all through all the right levels. And, there's just so much stacked against us getting that through. And also our judges, interpret the ECHR much more strictly than I think a lot of other EU countries.
It does seem that way.
So it does seem that way, yeah, definitely. So I think that's another problem that other EU countries' judges don't seem to interpret
100%.
them as strictly.
Yeah, I get it. Leslie, you've been great. You didn't sound too morose, but I hear your point. Thank you. Leslie in Llandudno making the point that at 61 she doesn't think this will be solved in her lifetime, and she's probably got 40 years left. Let's go to Ian down in London. Ian, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Right, I'm 68.
Right.
Right, so I beat her.
You're a proper old geezer.
Yeah, proper old geezer. Morose.
Yeah, nothing wrong. I mean, you're meant to be a bit miserable at 68, aren't you?
Right. No, I don't. I've got not that attitude. I'm very happy unless I'm ill, and I've got to be very ill.
Fair point.
But anyway, right. Okay. As you and I both know, when we were young, we were always told, don't throw the dirty water out before you've got clean to replace it. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Yeah.
This government have proven straight away they've got no intention whatsoever. And if that Keir Starmer's in front of me, I'd call him a barefaced lie to his face. The first thing, when they got in, they got rid of Rwanda, the plan. All right, it wasn't great, but it was a slight deterrent not to cross. Yeah. Correct?
Yeah.
They had nothing in the bag to replace it with. Nothing. Right? Now, they've been kicked in the soft point by the hotel thing. What have they done? They've gone to the courts. We're appealing the thing.
Yeah.
Quite simply showing that
we don't care what people think.
We don't care what the people think. Right?
Well, their argument, I guess, would be, which is why we asked the question at the beginning of all of this, Ian, where do you put 32,000 people? And if Yvette Cooper was here, she'd be saying to you and me, Ian, we're not trying to appeal it because we want to, but where are we going to put the extra people?
That's okay, fair point. But straight away, people are saying, we'll put them into army barracks. Okay, as long as it's there. But if you put them into just camps, and suddenly did, you'd have 38,000 more. I'm not saying the whole lot of 38,000, but you have 38,000 more possibilities of breaking out, doing God knows what, that the police, who are understaffed already now, that have got to try and look and see where those are going to and what they're up to. And if you're not giving them sort of benefits to and I really don't believe they should be getting any benefit, they'll be going out, nicking and doing all criminal offence to get money to pay for, to keep themselves afloat.
Yeah.
Right? And it just carries on every which way.
It just carries on. You're right. It does just carry on. And you think, can someone make this stop? It cannot be beyond the wit of mankind, Ian.
Well, the only way it's going to stop, quite simply, it's got to stop of where they come in initially into Europe.
Correct. Well, yes, that's true. That would be ultimate. But even if you couldn't do that, the idea that we can't say, I don't know, there must be some old naval ships or something where you would process people offshore. So you'd never set foot on soil, as it were. Or if you did, it would be only to walk up a ramp onto a boat that's somewhere offshore. It's got to be something. I know we're all thinking outside the box because we're living in this almost sitcom world. If it wasn't so darn serious and troubling and expensive and divisive, it would just be funny. It would just be funny. We've got 111,000 people claiming asylum in about half an hour. 32,000 people in hotels. How many? 32,000 in hotels. People coming over on work visas, and at the end of the work visas, conveniently going, I think I'm going to claim asylum. Get in the bin. We've got all of these kind of situations going on. It's nuts. So we kind of laugh in the face of no other kind of possible reaction because we've done all the crying and the shouting. Ian, you've been great. Thank you very much indeed for that. Rick says, we're overcomplicating it. Detain people. Don't waste time processing. Just leave them in detention centres until they ask to go home. No lawyers needed. It's simple. Marco says, what's happened to your hair? And where's your tie gone? You were looking slightly different at 11 a.m. this morning. Yeah, I was even using a fake name back then. I think it was it Mark, I think? Yeah, seemed to work for 3 hours anyway. 0344 499 1000. Lots to come in the next section. We carry on with Crime Con. Great story today, really interesting. And the voice of doom, who is this?
I certainly have things to say.
87222. Let's get the news headlines at 3.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, yeah, welcome back. It is the home of common sense. 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. What are we discussing here? Well, certainly that record 111,000 asylum claims under Labour. This is jaw-dropping numbers. Sparking nationwide protests over the weekend. There could be 27, well, there's 27 certainly planned. There could be more. This follows the Epping Hotel ruling, and now, of course, the owners and the government are appealing against that. The rise in small boat numbers, 32,000 people in hotels, straining communities, and visa renewals and extended stays also on the increase. So there's a lot to tuck into. You can understand why some people are saying, has something gone wrong here? We'll have more details on that. And if you did close all of those hotels, where are you going to put 32,000 people? Straightforward question, slightly trickier answer. Also this afternoon, Labour collected a record 100 billion quid in tax in July. 100 billion in a month, driven by Rachel Reeves's national insurance hike. But with debt at 2.89 trillion and borrowing at 60 billion just between April and July, economists are warning of a £50 billion fiscal gap, likely leading to tax rises in October. You notice how often the word million, billion or trillion crops up in a paragraph. You can see why people glaze over, and that's why politicians largely get away with it. They bombard you with figures, and then we lose the will to live. And our CrimeCon section returns this week. We're joined by Duncan Craig, OBE. He's founder of We Are Survivors. This is a charity established back in 2009 now to address the lack of support for male survivors of abuse. We'll have details on that a little later. Before we go any further, it's the voice of doom, of course, the political mystery voice bit. This is the voice we've been playing you for 18 days now.
I certainly have things to say.
Who is that? I said you've got to go back a load of years, like decades even. These are some of the guesses. Alex Salmond, no. Edward Short, Dennis Skinner, Robin Cook, Alex Douglas, Michael Foot, George Brown, Jeremy Thorpe, Enoch Powell, Ian MacLeod, Harold Wilson, Neil Thorne, Douglas Hugh. I mean, the list goes on. There's loads of the old classics there back in the day. But none of those are correct. In fact, we haven't got a right answer. Which means it rolls over to Tuesday, because we're off on Monday. Tuesday, we're back, and the Voice of Doom returns for day 19. So let's talk about that big figure that we mentioned, about the amount of tax that has been raked in over July alone. £100 billion in tax. I'm quite impressed by that in a weird way, because it's such a huge number. You can't quite get your head around. You can't imagine a mountain of notes piling up to form £100 billion. It's massive. However, it might be fueled by things like the national insurance hike. It doesn't really touch the sides in terms of our debt, which is 2.89 trillion. Economists, of course, are talking about this £50 billion fiscal gap. You could call it a black hole if you like. And we understand that Labour eyeing property, pensions and inheritance for October's tax hikes as U-turns and slowing productivity worsen the economic outlet. It's always a bit tricky, of course, because this is a government that have said out loud multiple times, no more tax rises for working people. Then you get into two interesting arguments. What constitutes a tax rise and what constitutes a working person? And we've already seen this with the national insurance hike. Let's get a word on this from former political editor of The Sun, now, of course, co-founder of Shillings Communications. He is George Pascoe Watson. George, always great to see you. Good afternoon to you. I mean, you've been, I say this often, you've been around the political block for many years. I was just talking about some of those old names in our mystery voice bit. I mean, I know you weren't quite covering the Harold Wilson elections, of course. You came after that, but you've certainly been there, seen it, done it. And you know this argument well, that governments have to wrestle with. It's constant, really. It never goes away. We're never in a surplus, are we? We're always in debt to some degree, but this is looking particularly bad at the moment.
Well, I almost feel like I should be wearing a black tie in this interview, because the state of the government's finances, and it's our finances, let's be quite clear, is as dire as it could possibly be. And I think that we should be very, very clear about that. I would say this would be true of any government which presides over the numbers right now, and it's extremely hard to see how we get out of the situation that we're in. £100 billion of tax. Why are we in this position? We're in this position because we're spending more than we earn. And everybody knows if you spend more than you earn, you get into trouble. The real problem we've got, Ian, is that the markets, the bond markets, are unlikely to allow the Chancellor to borrow more money in the future. So she's going to have to close that gap by increasing taxes further. And who pay the taxes? Our viewers and listeners today, the businesses who employ people, the businesses who invest in the country, they pay the taxes, and they don't do it for free or for love. They do it because they have to, and that means they will be restricted in their desire to invest in the United Kingdom, and that hits Rachel Reeves' growth plans. So we're in a terrible sort of negative spiral here where there doesn't seem to be a way forward. The reason the bond markets are so important, of course, is because they set the cost of borrowing. And as you say, this country is borrowing huge sums of money. And because Keir Starmer's Labour government is not particularly strong, despite a 170-seat majority, the bond markets say there's greater risk in lending money to the UK, and therefore they put the price up, and that costs us more in servicing the debt. So it's a horrible spiral that we're in.
How do we get our credit rating back? Let's put it that way.
Well, one of the critical measurements is the strength of a government. And we've all seen in recent weeks and months that the government has been struggling to get through its main policies, despite having a 170-seat majority. So one of the first things Keir Starmer needs to do, if he can, is to show stability and authority in his own government. And if he can do that, then the bond markets will take a view that, okay, there's greater strength in the government. That means they probably can get their policies through, and that might take some of the margin off. But effectively, they need to see that the Chancellor is sticking to her big plans to rebalance the books in this country. And of course, that's really hard for her because she's got lots of Labour MPs in the House of Commons saying, we don't want you to cut the cost of welfare. We think the welfare bill is fine. We want you to spend more on public sector salaries. And so she's caught in a political bind.
Where does that... And of course, this at a time, George, where we hear today that a quarter of Labour voters could support Jeremy Corbyn. So clearly, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, the top team on the government front bench, are trying to... I mean, it's often the worst thing you can do is try and appease everybody because you end up, pleasing nobody. But that's sort of the game they're trying to play, isn't it? We know that they had idea for welfare reforms, and that largely got ditched, really, in reality. They claim otherwise, but it didn't really come to anything. But unless you're going to get serious, lots of our listeners and viewers say, well, things like immigration's costing £7-8 million a day when you factor everything in. These are huge numbers. Welfare, as you rightly say, and lots of other areas. But for some reason, there's a kind of almost a convention, isn't there, George, in politics, where certain areas governments don't really touch. They're either not brave enough, or they think they won't risk their political skin in order to implement it. But it's going to take some, to coin that phrase, outside the box thinking, this, isn't it?
Well, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister were right over the last year to say the only solution for Britain is greater economic growth. That still remains true. That was Liz Truss's view, and it's the right solution, because only if we generate more revenue can we afford the welfare and the public sector services that we want, and the infrastructure that we need, the roads, the railways. That's what we need to do. We've got an aging population, which costs more money. Medicines are more expensive because they're more sophisticated, and so we go on. So we need to generate more revenue. That is the actually only solution. We also have to remember, Ian, and it's easily forgotten, that the cost of the epidemic of COVID was beyond anything anybody had imagined. It was unpredicted, and therefore we should be honest and say it's going to take many generations to pay back the debt, and that's really the problem that we're in. But I think that if you continue to look to business to close the tax gap, then you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble, because it's the businesses that you need to invest in this country who will say, we can't invest anymore because we're being taxed to the hilt.
Well, it's going to be a grim, maybe not quite a winter of discontent in that respect, but some would say financially, you know, this is going to get perhaps worse before it even begins to get better. George, always appreciate your wisdom and insight into these matters. Thank you, George Pascoe-Watson, former political editor at The Sun, with us on the programme. Now, of course, the founder of Shillings Communications. Lots of comment in from you. This one from Brad. Oh, I love these ones. Brad says, can I put the difference between £1 million and £1 billion into perspective? A million seconds is 9 days. 1 billion seconds is 32 years. That's just great, isn't it? 9 days, 32. There's another one, isn't there, on the difference? It's about distance. How long it would take you to get to X and how many times you'd have to do it in comparison to the billion and the million. But that's greater. 1 million seconds is 9 days, 1 billion seconds is 32 years. So when you meet a billionaire, you're in completely different territory from your average millionaire. Neil, Stoke-on-Trent, says, if you want to stop immigration, all you have to do is make immigrants UK citizens, so they can then see how hard it is to be British when they have to work their fingers to the bone to pay taxes to keep the immigrants. Yeah, there is maybe kind of call your bluff thing. And even if, and this is the mad thing about this, we've got 450,000 young females not working, nearly 1 million young people not in education or employment between the ages of 16 and 24. 1 million, okay? So we don't need the additional, let's call it unskilled labour. So I don't think we need those people to fill any void. And even if you did, the average person who's stuck in a hotel, I promise you, stuck in a hotel, whether it's, it could be anywhere at all around the country, it could be in Maidstone, it could be in Leicester, Oldham, Exeter, Leeds, Altrincham, Maidstone, you name it, any of those places. I promise you there's not a brain surgeon or an engineer among them. I absolutely promise you. Those people are not in those hotels. So even if all of those people in hotels wanted to work, and I absolutely think some of them would go, yeah, I want to start a new life, I have a job. What kind of job are they going to be doing? Bearing in mind, many will have a poor command or no command of English whatsoever, which pretty much rules you out of most jobs in the UK. And even those that can speak great English, what jobs are they going to have? Where would they be working? Just to trying to envisage that. And it's not going to be anywhere that's going to change the face of our economy. I think we can all agree on that. I'm not being unkind saying that. I'm just pointing out a basic reality. Dave is in London. Rachel Reeves and Tax. Dave, have you got it sorted? Good afternoon.
Hi, mate. I think I have. And is your voice of doom Peter Hain?
Oh, no. Too recent. Too recent.
Yeah, too recent. Yeah, look, it's clear now what's going on. Labour are now the party of the public sector. They're not the party of the workers, the hard workers, these workers. They are simply unadulterated the party of the public sector. And this is why they're allowing the public sector to keep growing, because every time they employ someone, it's another voter.
Yep.
And if people in the private sector, if anybody in the private sector is voting Labour, then you deserve everything you're going to get, because they're just coming after our houses, our pensions. The public sector isn't impacted by all of these inheritance tax hits or anything else on our private pensions. They don't get hit with that. Yeah. They carry on regardless. And so this is how obscene it's getting now. Sadiq Khan, how many people has he got now earning over 150 grand?
Oh, God.
200, 300?
The list goes on. It's all of these areas, isn't it, that no one, for some reason, seems to be able to... Unless we're all wrong, Dave. Are we all wrong? Are we going... You know, we sit here like you and I are talking now. You could be having this conversation in the pub, and your mates go, right, you've got 200 million here, 200, 500 million there, and you add it all up, and you go, surely that's got to... And then the government always come along and they go, oh, it sounds like a lot of money, but it won't touch the sides. I'm pretty sure if you add it all together, it does touch the sides.
Yeah, not only that, we get stuck into these debates like, oh, if we don't put up VAT on private schools, we can't afford these teachers. We keep coming up with these false trade-offs.
Yeah.
You know, okay, do we put up VAT on private schools, or do we sack 300 MPs? Sack 300 MPs. Do we put up VAT on private schools, or do we cut public sector pensions? Cut public sector pensions. So this is the problem now. And I can see now everyone online is having this ridiculous debate around whether we should have a property tax when you sell or when you buy, whether it should replace council tax. Why are we having these conversations? We can shut this stuff down now. The migrants, the net zero, the giving away Chagos Islands, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the big stuff. There's like 3 big price tags that could be addressed immediately. And I reckon if you sat there, if somebody said to me, right, your day's challenge today is to come up with a very basic, I wouldn't have the details because I'm not privy to them, a very basic idea of where you could save costs. I reckon I could get that up to several billion by 6 p.m. and then I'd go for a pint and celebrate. Listen, Dave, you've been great. Thank you very much indeed for that. Mark in Selby says if someone boards a plane from France to the UK, destroying their passport en route at the airport, they are detained and put back on a plane from whence they came. They're not released into the wilds of Britain. I just don't understand why the same service applies to men, doesn't apply to the men arriving by boat from France. This does not compute. It really doesn't compute. And if you say, do you know the other thing you can do? You go, there's 111,000 people claiming asylum. This is just a ridiculous number regardless. So we will work on deporting 111,000. I reckon we could find another 100,000 out there in all sorts of towns and cities around the UK, people who've not really got the right documentation, and even if they have, they came over on a bit of a moody, tenuous deal because they were someone's great uncle or some malarkey like that. Go even greater, get that figure up to 300,000. It could be done if you wanted to do it. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you in a couple of moments. This is Talk.
I mean, what happened yesterday could seriously undermine the government's national plan. As you mentioned, we got Labour-run Rural Council, but also Tamworth as well, and they both said that they are actively considering legal action against the Home Office over the use of these hotels. And it was quite interesting what your listener said, because you just read out his message where he said, if these hotels close and they're on 3-year contracts, are we still going to pay for these hotels even if they close?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 22 minutes after 3 o'clock. Back on the phones in just a second. Let's get a couple of voice note. This is Nikki in Tunbridge Wells.
It's such a shame that we can't swap some hard-working immigrants. They're not all cleaners and delivery drivers. There's doctors and surgeons, etc. Why can't we swap them for some British people who for generations have been on the benefits, loving the lifestyle and taking my tax, hard-earned tax, to pay for it?
Thank you, Nikki. Here's one on a different issue from Heather in Kent.
Yeah, I don't do holidays. I haven't had a holiday since 2001. But if I did, it would definitely be in the UK. And I would not spend any money in France. I would not go abroad because there's absolutely no need. There are some beautiful places in the UK, and it's just a matter of picking the weather. But do what Kevin O'Sullivan's doing right this minute. Go down to Cornwall. Fabulous. Good man.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to be sitting in 28 degrees heat around a pool in Saint-Tropez in the south of France when you can get 15 degrees in Cornwall? It's a no-brainer, right? Let's go to Sally in Monmouth. Sally, how you doing?
Hi, I'm fine.
Good, nice to hear it. Welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
It's about the question of whether the Home Office, would owe the hotels money for accommodation if they weren't allowed to accommodate migrants.
Yes.
Well, my view is that the hotel owners contracted with the Home Office to supply suitable accommodation for migrants.
Correct.
If they haven't gone through the legal processes to enable them to supply accommodation to migrants, they have failed to make the supply they contracted to make. Therefore, the contract is void and the Home Office doesn't owe them any more money.
So, how have they failed, though?
Because they haven't met the legal criteria to supply the accommodation.
But presumably, when they signed the contract, they would have satisfied someone that they'd met the criteria.
Not necessarily. This is what this is the whole point. This is the principle of the ruling and why the hotel itself was said to have not met its legal obligation.
Well, how did... Because as far as I understood it, Sally...
It's down to the owner of the hotel to apply for a change of use.
No, I agree with that, and that's what I thought where the problem was. So you're saying that because they didn't apply for a change of use, the contract is void?
Yes.
But should the Home Office, bearing in mind it's the Home Office, not have satisfied themselves that that was the case before they signed the deal? Even if they did, or thought they did, yeah, I hear it. So they were always... It's a bit like unwittingly forgetting to renew your car insurance, yeah? You can't
exactly.
say... You can't say, I forgot. That doesn't count. I was busy that day. It doesn't count. So even if they thought they'd done it, the fact they hadn't is the pervading point. Yeah.
Yeah, it would mean that the Home Office could say, no, all right, pay us back half of what we paid you, but we don't actually owe you the money.
Well, both the hotel now and the Home Office are appealing against this, so they're in kind of tandem now.
Yeah, but at the same time, the hotel was told it couldn't. It was refused leave to appeal, actually, in the High Court.
Are they not allowed to... I mean, does that mean they can never, ever change the use of the hotel?
Well, no, it means that they have to apply for planning consent, but then that has to go before the planning committee and will take about 6 months.
I mean, I would have thought, and I might be wrong on this, Sally, but I know that there's lots of people, including Kemi Badenoch, who are trying to, suggest that other hotels or other local authorities do the same thing. Wouldn't any hotel that is currently housing migrants have had to have gone through
Yeah, they should have done. It's called a change of use. It's
change of use, yeah.
Thing. If you get a planning consent to build a house and you then try to build a nursing home,
you can't just do correct.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You have to apply for a change of use.
So you'd kind of think that the big chains that are involved in housing migrants, you might think that their lawyers would have, been onto this, right?
You would think that, but on the other hand, I think it was actually the Labour Home Secretary, John Reid, who said 20 years ago that the Home Office wasn't fit for purpose.
Correct.
All it needs is someone, and remember that this has all been done through a third party, which is Serco, probably. Will have said, don't worry, it's the government, we'll take care of that.
That's what, I think they've just been blasé about the whole thing. It'd be fascinating to know how many hotels never did apply for the change of use, because it's quite significant, isn't it? I mean, bearing in mind how tough they are, Sally, on everything from health and safety and how many people you can have where, etc., etc. You'd think that would be almost the first thing somebody would do. But I guess governments came knocking on the door of big hotel companies, whether they're independents or part of a chain, and said, look, we need this place desperately. Here's £6 squillion. Let's have it. And the hotels thought, well, it's the government, so, OK, we'll give it to you. Sally, I've got to move on, but thank you very much indeed for that. Rosemary is in Kent. Rosemary, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yes.
Hi.
I think a way to make a deterrent would be to hire or commandeer, 2 islands on the west coast of Scotland, fill it up with mobile homes, caravans and tents. You'd have to put in facilities like sewerage and water.
Yep.
And I think it would be a good deterrent. And anybody that comes away, is not allowed to stay, I think they also now need to have a tattoo on the bottom of their foot so that when they come back again, because they keep coming back, these people, they get sent away sometimes and they come back on a boat. Several of them have done that already. But if they got some sort of mark on them, we would know that they've been here before and rejected.
Yeah, you can see why that last point might sit uncomfortably with many, bearing in mind what tattooing people symbolises.
Well, yes, but it would only be a small mark on the bottom.
No, I hear the principle of what you're saying. I do agree, though, the first point, that if you thought you were arriving in Dover and then you were going to be taken on a coach journey to the very tip of Scotland and beyond, that would be a good few hours from south to north. And then you were going to be on an island, and no one's going to abuse you. There will be food, there will be a form of accommodation, probably in a tent. If you thought that was what you were going to get when you got to the UK, I honestly believe, and I'm sure you do, Rosemary, that would alter the amount of people coming.
I'm quite sure of it, but we're never going to alter the number of people coming because STARMA is WEF, World Economic Forum, and the plan from the WEF was always to flood the West with immigrants.
I don't. That's a conspiracy theory. I don't know about any of that stuff.
Actually.
Eh?
It's in a book. Klaus Schwab wrote a book.
But yeah, I've read the book. I've read it twice, actually. I didn't see that there was any... I mean, the WE Economic Forum, I think you have to... I keep saying this to people. The WE Economic Forum is only the sum of its component parts. Its component parts are businesses who pay £5 million a year to be members. So the WEF in itself isn't the ruling body. They only rule on what's agreed by the people that pay the money, if that makes sense. They can't change anything.
No, but it's people with all the money that belong.
But why would, I don't know, Microsoft, or why would Tesco or whoever else goes to the WEF, why would they?
Might not be them. It's mainly the bankers and all those sort of people.
But why would they want more people to?
They want to run the world. That's what it's all about.
They want to run the world.
Yeah, it's the World Economic Forum. It's in the.
Well, it's not really. Doesn't mean it in that respect. Like the World Economic Forum is the economy of the planet, right?
Well, perhaps somebody could come on and tell us about the World Economic Forum and give us all the details about what they think. I mean,
it's quite easy to work out. By the way, I absolutely pathologically loathe the existence of the World Economic Forum. I just don't buy into the conspiracy of it. It's the biggest, most global and powerful lobby group, if you like, on the planet. But you have to look at it the right way round. The members of the World Economic Forum, you're absolutely right in some respect, Rosemary, in that businesses are more powerful than government. That is the point, right? They have more sway than domestic governments around the world. And that's the bit that irks us all. Because you think, well, hang on, is that really how it should work? But it probably has done for years. I mean, the World Economic Forum has been there nearly 60 years, Rosemary. Nobody said anything until about half an hour ago, till Twitter was invented.
In 1954 by Prince of the Netherlands, in 1954, and it was the Bilderberg Group, I believe. That's how it all started.
No, that's a separate thing altogether.
That was the idea when it started.
The Bilderberg Group is still there, and the World Economic Forum, I think I'm right in saying, started in possibly 1970.
Yeah, but the idea, that's when it all started. Things started changing, shall we say.
71, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can talk. I'm fascinated by it. I'm genuinely fascinated. You're not wrong to question it, Rosemary, that's for sure. Thank you for that. But the idea that there is a plan that, to flood the West with, that isn't written anywhere, and you won't find that in, what's his name, Klaus Schwab's book. And if it is there, I missed it when I read it. You won't find much fun and laughter either in that book. Word of advice, spoiler alert, don't read it. But if you want to confirm or deny a few things, then take a look at it if you have to. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
524 on Talk. So much to get through here on the programme. And, of course, it's a Friday, so we talk crime. This week, we turn the spotlight to Duncan Craig, OBE, founder of We Are Survivors, a groundbreaking charity supporting male survivors of sexual abuse. A survivor himself, Duncan has transformed trauma into action, providing life-changing therapy, advocacy and community programmes. With us now, Duncan, good afternoon to you, sir.
Afternoon, Ian.
Listen, clearly anyone that's involved in a charity and an organisation that highlights and attempts to assist and help people in this area, it's, you know, doffing caps all round. I know you're not looking for congratulations. Sounds like the wrong word in this context, doesn't it? Congratulations. But you take the point. I mean, just talk us through, Duncan. How did this begin? I mentioned your own story there. Yeah. What was the was the catalyst for starting the charity?
Yeah, very much so. So go right back to 2005 and having spent many years working in theatre and entertainment, I kind of was looking for a change. So early 2000s, I started volunteering. Like most people who work in organisations, in charities, start somewhere, and volunteering was where I started. Yeah. And it was working for a drug and alcohol service. So working with people who were street homeless, injecting drug users. And I started noticing trauma. Like, nobody wakes up one morning thinking, I'm going to be a drug addict today. That there was something fundamentally feeling like they're broken in some way. And so I thought, I need to kind of do something about this. And so I went working in the organisation. That led me to kind of start thinking, there's something not right. A bit like I had an itch to scratch, but I didn't know where the itch was.
So you were convinced that, hang on, there's a lot of drug addicts, there's a lot of drunks, but these are manifestations of something else. They are,
without a doubt,
they're symptoms, and you you could sense that the more you worked on in this area.
Yeah, very much so. And so I took myself off to therapy, did some work on my own kind of depression, anxiety, thought I want to be a therapist, so I went training. And whilst working in the NHS, doing my clinical practice, I was working with a young man who had been sexually abused. And I suppose in some way I couldn't get his story out of my mind. And so in my own therapy, explored that. And then I suppose the bubble burst, Ian. All of those years of me keeping things to myself, and in some way not even necessarily recognising what was going on for me when I was a child. So I was abused from about 11 to about 17, and I had to kind of face up to that. Went looking for support and realised that there was so limited support for boys and men. And so decided that I would, as soon as I got better, as soon as I got qualified, and as soon as I got well, I would do something. And the 5th of February 2009, we opened the doors, and we have gone in the past 16 and a bit years. We've gone from being fundamentally a website and a pay-as-you-go mobile phone helpline to now the largest male survivor organisation in the UK, supporting about 2,500 men every single year in both the community and across all 15 prisons in the Northwest.
I mean, this is an incredible story, and you've just described it brilliantly. And I guess it's an area that sexual abuse to men, where men are the victims, still to this day. I was reading a story this morning of I think it was a teacher that had been arrested for the rape of a male pupil, female teacher. And as I read it, I even thought it's interesting how this isn't quite taken still as seriously. We know it's bad, it's kind of really bad, but it's not as bad as that, you know. And this whole area where you know, you can almost hear some people going, male sex, I don't believe it, mate. We know as, you know, children are clearly abused, but it's a very different, it's still, even though it's the 21st century, even though it's 2025, Duncan, it still doesn't seem to carry the level of seriousness in some people's minds that it should do.
You're absolutely spot on there, Ian. And we have to start with the fact that in this country, sexual violence committed against boys and men is classed as a crime against women and girls. So for me as a male survivor, in government policy and government strategy, I am classed as a male victim of violence against women and girls. I mean, that's not even English.
Wow.
That doesn't even make any sense whatsoever. That's been the case for about 15 years. I have been part of the violence against women and girls work for ever since it kind of started, and it was only about 10 years ago that the public at large even began to understand that, when the Crown Prosecution Service finally admitted that all of the data that you see, that when you see on the news, when you read in the news, all of the data pertaining to tackling violence against women and girls also includes men and boys.
And I don't think anybody would have known that. So that's just is that just a legal thing that's not been updated, or what's the deal there? Because that would just require someone to kind of get real and say, well, look, we need to sort of slightly rebrand this a little bit. It's not describing things.
You would think, and I continue to ask, who is fighting to keep men and boys as victims in the violence against women and girls strategy? And currently, it's with Minister Jess Phillips. There is a new strategy that's due out, we think, towards the end of September, October time. I've been working with the government on developing this, along with colleagues from the sector, and yet we're still classed as victims of violence against women and girls. It just makes no sense whatsoever. However, here in Greater Manchester, as the late, great Anthony H. Wilson once said, this is Manchester, we do things differently here, and so our Mayor, Andy Burnham, and our Deputy Mayor, Kate Green, they commissioned myself and a professor from University of Manchester, and we have just written and published the very first strategy dealing with domestic abuse, sexual violence, on so-called honour-based abuse and forced marriage pertaining to men and boys. And it is literally, it's the start of something.
It's very interesting. And by the way, house points to mention Tony Wilson, of course, the late great. But what an influence on so many areas of life, from journalism to nightclubs. Goodness me, who ticked all of those boxes? But on that point, it's just funny you mentioned things like arranged marriages. When we think of an arranged marriage, we think of the female victim, don't we? We tend not to think as the bloke is also in the same boat.
Yeah, very much so. And what we do know is that there is... So first of all, we need to get better at data collection without a shadow of a doubt. But what we do know is for many cultures where arranged marriages is part of the culture, there are often cultures where homosexuality, for instance, is part of being an abomination, etc. And so we often hear of lots of gay men who are unable to be themselves. They're unable to kind of live the life that they want because of the honour and the shame that it brings onto the family, and so they're often married into a traditional heterosexual marriage. And you know, and there's something for me, just as a human, there's something about why would we want to push people into doing something that they don't want to do. I, as a victim of child sexual abuse, as a victim of sexual exploitation and rape, I know what that feels like, to be forced into, metaphorically and physically speaking, into something you don't want to do. It takes everything away from you, and so we've got to start talking about this.
Listen, Duncan, give us your what's the best website people can find? I mean, a lot of guys listening to this go, do you know what, I just need a bit more information, or no one's ever explained it in that way, and you know, is there really someone listening to me or can listen? What's the best port of call for people who want to get in touch or find out more about We Are Survivors?
So you can go to www.wearesurvivors.org.uk, and for anyone that's in Manchester on the 27th of September, come and have a chat at CrimeCon.
Indeed, 27th of September is the right date. Listen, Duncan, thank you for your time, sir. Really enlightening stuff and fascinating in a slightly unfortunate way. Funny we live in this world where so many charities, a proliferation of charities that address all these different tangents of human abuse in different ways, whether it's kids, adults, domestic, sexual violence. The list sadly goes on. He mentioned there, Duncan mentioned that 27th of September, because CrimeCon, of course, was in London. It's now heading to Manchester on that date, 27th of September. If you're fascinated by some areas of criminality, and I believe Duncan will be speaking there as well at CrimeCon. But I can tell you, our friends at CrimeCon are offering Talk listeners an exclusive discount. So if you use the code TALK at the checkout, you can get 10% off your tickets. If you just Google CrimeCon, use the word TALK at the checkout, you can get 10% off the tickets. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget, of course, you can download and listen to all the Talk Crime podcasts on your favourite podcast app. We'll be back with more calls from you coming next on Talk.
What happened yesterday could seriously undermine the government's national plan. As you mentioned, we got Labour-run Rural Council, but also Tamworth as well, and they both said that they are actively considering legal action against the Home Office over the use of these hotels. And it was quite interesting what your listener said, because you just read out his message where he said, if these hotels close and they're on 3-year contracts, are we still going to pay for these hotels even if they close?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Before we go any further, we actually had this from Mick in Accrington, who says, how's Kev getting on? It once took me 13 hours to get to Cornwall from Accrington a few years back. Traffic was horrendous. I can get to Goa in India in 9 hours. How is it? Let's have a look at the map. There is the map. He's trekking along. That's the Kev tracker that we're going. Well, let's catch up with the man himself. Driving down to the southwest. How's it going, Kev?
Well, you join us, Ian, at a very exciting moment. We've just done, I would say, it's taken us about 2 hours to do about 30 miles.
No way.
Yeah, seriously. We're on the M5. It is literally a car park. But you join us at a very exciting moment because we've just pulled off into a service station. You know, because when you have to spend so long in a car not moving, certain physical requirements come into play, if you catch my drift. Not just for us, but also for the dog. So
yeah.
Here we are at some kind of service, just pulling in. But yeah, as I say earlier, I was laughing and thinking, ha ha ha. Wouldn't it be funny if Talk's story about the terrible traffic didn't come true and I could say, no, it's fine, I've just soared all the way to Cornwall. Well, it was going quite well until we came to Bristol, and now you got your story. It is a living hell out there.
It's a living hell. Kev is proof of this. So you set off at what time this morning, Kev?
It was 10:30.
So 10:30, it's now 4 o'clock, and you're only in Bristol.
Yeah, we're past Bristol now, but only about, it seems as if we're in Bristol like yesterday, but actually it's only about 30 miles back, but it's taken us about 2 hours. And according to our sat-nav, our destination, which I don't think is much more than about 60, 70 miles, they say it's going to take us another 2.5 hours.
That's insanity.
It is bad out here. And it's sheer weight of traffic. You know that thing when the traffic concertinas? So you get these brief moments.
Yes.
Where suddenly you're going 70 miles an hour and you go to Henrietta. I say to Henrietta, that's it, we're in the clear. And then you go around the corner, bang, you hit the brick wall again.
100%.
It's pretty bad out here.
Yeah, it's almost designed just to take, it takes you up there. You go, we've done it. Oh no, it's back again. And there you are. And of course, just to compound the misery, Kev, you're in a petrol, one of those service stations where, I mean, it's literally cheaper to eat the money than it is to actually buy stuff in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of people here as well. I think people have just sort of decided, let's get off the road and spend a couple of hours not in a traffic jam. So they said this was going to be the worst traffic day of the year, 3 million people hitting the road, me and Henrietta being just 2 of them.
And
so
Chaz.
And Chaz, of course. All the predictions I can confirm were accurate, right on the money. This is not nice.
It's come true. Listen, I'm pretty sure that we are going to keep our eye on what's happening. Kev, enjoy the rest of the journey. Just pull over and have another donut if you have to, because I would just
have
wait.
A few beers.
Exactly. Yeah. I know the police don't rate it, but I mean, you could say it's an emergency situation. That's Kevin O'Sullivan, our own Kevin O'Sullivan, trying to get down to the southwest. He's going to Cornwall, and he's already in County. He's been on the road for, what do you say, 10:30? So he's been there already at 6.5 hours. They've just come out the other side of Bristol. But he come from London. Man alive. I mean, you should be there by now, right? Should he have gone last night? You see, late into the night. Andrew is in Fife. Back to that issue we've been discussing about immigration. Andrew, what have you got for us?
Hello, Mr. Collins. How are you?
Very well, sir. Yeah. All nice to have you with us. Fire away.
I'm up in Scotland, and we haven't got it as bad as what you've got down south. That's for sure. But what I really don't understand, that sitting and discussing and making up decisions what it's going to do is going to make any difference. I mean, why didn't they get the army out and get them put back over the seas where there's no problem?
Yeah.
I just don't understand.
Do you think
staying in London? I know that's the capital of this island, but I mean, it's kind of a wee bit strange.
Do you think these protests are going to do anything? Do you think they'll make a difference? We got protests from Falkirk to Bournemouth, Liverpool to Maidstone.
We've got them in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Perth. Yep, I mean, it's happening up here as well. But putting out flags and protesting, what's it going to do? It's not going to stop them being what they're doing.
Yeah. And that is the sad. Well, that's always the.
That's the problem, yeah.
I hear it. I hear it. Listen, Andrew, you get the last word on this, Andrew. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. But I do sense that when people, I mentioned to Mark Dolan a little earlier, the biggest ever protest this country's ever seen was the Stop the War protest. That was a sort of a million-man march, pretty much, snaking its way around the streets of London. It was absolutely vast. By the way, organised before social media. I don't know how they did it, but they did it and somehow got the word out there and people turned up. It made no difference at all. And the second biggest march in our history, stand to be corrected on this, it might have changed, was the pro-fox hunting march. Remember when Blair came in, 97, one of the first acts they did was make fox hunting illegal. Those that pursue countryside sports and those that want to maintain the countryside, farmers and the like, said, well, actually, no, we want to keep fox hunting. And consequently, they decided to do their thing and organise a protest. And we know what happened. Nothing. Precisely nothing. Now, before we hand over to Peter Cardwell, we're giving you the chance to win £5,000 spending money plus tickets to watch American football. It returns to Wembley in October. The LA Rams against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're talking about 6 seats, private box and £5,000. Here's how you can enter.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word Wembley to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or enter for free by calling 0330 880 338. All entries must be received by 25th August at 11 p.m. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. See TalkSport.com for terms and conditions.
There it is, and be that. We've got Peter Cardwell coming up on the other side of...
Hello, Ian. How are you doing?
The man who doesn't feel the cold, he was telling us.
Well, some of us have more layers of insulation than others.
Do you think it's that? Because I've sat in the studio for the last 3 hours, and I can tell you, quite honestly, I am absolutely freezing.
You're going to a fireside to warm your hands.
We've got the reverse to what we had the other day, when the air conditioning broke and it was 34 degrees.
That's right.
Now they've fixed the air conditioning, but when you turn the button the other way, it doesn't do anything.
You're just always complaining, Ian, aren't you?
It's constantly cold.
Classic presenter.
Half the team out there. Half the team have been in here and gone, oh God, I can't stand it.
No, I'm a big fan. Yeah, keep it.
Well, a big fan is the problem. You're too much of a fan.
Yes, a big fan of the big fans.
Yeah.
We're talking today about the wave of protests and counter-protests planned over the weekend. We'll talk about the Notting Hill Carnival as well. Is it time to move it? Significant bank holiday travel delays expected. I know you're talking to Kevin O'Sullivan. We'll be checking in with him as well, getting all the